I was driving down the highway and a rock flies up and cracks my windshield. Are you kidding me? I asked for recommendations and everyone sang the same thing. Safe Light Repair, Safe Light Replace. I booked an appointment at safelight.com and they came to me for free. It was that easy.
Cracked windshield? Go to safelight.com now to schedule your free mobile service and let Safe Light come to you. Conditions may apply.
Safe Light Repair, Safe Light Replace.
For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Now your ideas don't have to wait. Now they have everything they need to come to life. Dell Technologies and Intel are creating technology that loves ideas, loves expanding your business, evolving your passions. We push what technology can do, so great ideas can happen right now. Find out how to bring your ideas to life at Dell.com. Welcome to Now.
Check out Unbreakable with Jay Glazer.
Welcome to Unbreakable and Mental Health Podcast.
Or Inside the Parker with Rob Parker for you threadheads.
Baseball.
The I Want Your Flex podcast with Dan Beyer and Mike Harmon for Fantasy Junkies. And What About Everything Up on Game presents offers. Want more Ben Maller? How about the Fifth Hour podcast? We have a podcast for everyone. And it's all on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. The most fearless voice in sports is on FS1. The one and only Colin Cowherd is bold, unique, and outspoken.
Wow.
You can see him on The Herd, weekdays at noon Eastern on FS1 in the Fox Sports app.
It is Fox Sports Saturday right here on Fox Sports Radio. Props to the crew, our trusted producer, Bo Benson. Chris Perfett, technical producer Isaac Lowenkron, crushing the updates and crushing life. Top of the hour, up on game. LeVar Arrington, TJ Hushman's out of Plaxico Burst. They've got you covered. We've got some picks to make. Let's do it.
Rapid fire.
All right, Jared, we'll start with you, man. What are you thinking?
Oh, boy. All right, I'll give you one Yurfie, and then we'll do two basketball. So let's go Brewers, Cardinals, Yurfie. Bino, this is your neck of the woods here, and I'm sure you've been paying attention to the St. Louis offense this year. They have not scored a run in the first inning at home this year, and yesterday was a really low-scoring game. Well, today we've got Miles Michaelis on the hill, and I think, he hasn't had really a good year. And on the other side, DL Hall, lefty. I love this Cardinals offense against lefties, so they're going to get a run in the first inning today. One of these teams is going to score in the first inning. Brewers, Cardinals, Yurfie. Bradley Beal over 17.5 points. I talked about Bradley Beal earlier. KD a couple weeks ago said, hey, Bradley, be more aggressive. You can really be the engine of this team. Well, since then, he's averaging almost 30 points per game, 27 to be exact over his last 5. He had 36 on Sunday against the T-Wolves. I think he goes over 17.5 points in this game. And we talked about LeBron and how he rises to the occasion. I think it's the rebounding total I'm interested in tonight. Over 7.5 rebounds is minus 125. He went over this mark in 3 out of the 4 Western Conference Finals games last year, averaging almost 10 rebounds per game with the Lakers in his postseason career. Over 7.5 rebounds for LeBron James today against Denver.
Okay, I like Luka Doncic, this Mavs-Clippers matchup. We were talking about it earlier. Maybe the Nuggets are a little overrated. Maybe the Mavericks are a little underrated heading into the postseason. They're only favored by 1.5 on the road in L.A. Give me the Mavericks there, and they'll cover up those points. The Lakers getting 7.5 against those Nuggets I was just talking about. Give me the points. I like the Lakers plus 7.5. I think LeBron is aware of the moment. I think they'll do their best with their bigs to shut down Jokic in the paint. And then moving on to Suns, Timberwolves, I like the Wolves minus 1.5.
Okay. I like the last pick because it was the quickest.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going Nikola Jokic. Give me the Joker. I'm going points, assists, and rebounds over 49.5. He's got to get to 50. I'm going to take 2 team totals. Knicks over 105.5. Sixers under 103.5. Make gobs of money.
We are Fox Sports.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-566-3062. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS. There is zero risk to you. If we can't reduce your tax debt, then you pay nothing. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have a 5-star rating on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com or call 800-566-3062. That's 800-566-3062. Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
Hey, what's going on? It's Willard and Dibs for Safeway. Enjoy 3 amazing deals, and as always, earn 4 times reward points on hundreds of exclusive offers with your Safeway app. This week, Signature Farms Chicken Picnic Pack, drumsticks, thighs, leg quarters, buy one, get one free, equal or lesser value, member price. We're getting close to picnic season, Dibs.
Yeah, and we're always close to quarter season, which used to be a game we played in the fraternity back in the 90s, Mark.
Don't talk about that. Red seedless grapes for $1.88 per pound, or pristine green seedless grapes for $2.99 per pound, member price. Pristine, like your wardrobe.
Yes, and grapes, like my favorite beverage, which also involves grapes.
Yes, it does. And this week's digital deal, Lucerne Milk or Open Nature Almond Beverage, half-gallon selected varieties, $1.97 each, member price, limit 4. Anything you want to say about milk?
I got a baby who loves milk.
Yes, you do. These and other great digital deals are available in the For You section on the Safeway app. Go to Safeway.com for more details, and we will see you in the aisles.
Find a brand new home with all the space you need. Signature Homes offers move-in ready homes with flexible spaces, gourmet kitchens, and spacious great rooms in highly desirable neighborhoods with great schools and close to shopping. Priced from the 600,000s. Signature Homes is an award-winning home builder with a 40-year tradition of quality craftsmanship. Visit sighomes.com to find your new home. That's SIGhomes.com.
Attention facility professionals, property managers, and building owners. Earn free education credits and network with the top professionals by attending the West Coast Buildings and Facilities Management Conference this May 22nd and 23rd at the Alameda County Fairgrounds in Pleasanton. Sponsored by BOMA, IFMA, and NECA, this event is your one-stop shop for all things buildings and facilities throughout the Bay Area. Register to attend today and receive free lunch and parking. This event is free for all qualified professionals. Register online at proexpos.com. That's PROEXPOS.com.
Life doesn't stop when the economy is uncertain. The market might not care you have a wedding to plan or a kid to put through school. And inflation doesn't know you've got a family to feed. But Bank of America does, and is here to help. With digital tools to help you save and local experts in the Bay Area, you can keep life moving forward the way you need it to. Bank of America. What would you like the power to do? Learn more at BofA.com/San Francisco. Bank of America N.A. member FDIC, equal credit opportunity lender.
When you pick up some scratches cause you want a fun break, the playful way you scratch is the next choice you should make. You can make your dog's leg kick and scratch with that. You could even grab a laser pointer and use your cat. You could build yourself a homemade scratching machine or use a piece from your chess set. Go ahead, grab the queen. Scratch like a DJ with your record player. A cactus could scratch off that scratchable layer. Cause when it comes to scratching, there's a million playful ways. Thanks to scratchers from the California Lottery, a little play can make your day.
Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. Like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Get the one and done you want for your dog's monthly protection. NexGard Plus, a Foxalon or Moxidectin and Pyrantel chewable tablets. Protects against fleas, ticks, heartworm disease, roundworms, and hookworms. All in one delicious, beef-flavored soft chew. Use with caution in dogs with a history of seizures or neurologic disorders. Dogs should be tested for existing heartworm infection prior to starting a preventive. Ask your vet about NexGard Plus chews.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-575-6812. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS. There is zero risk to you. If we can't reduce your tax debt, then you pay nothing. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have a 5-star rating on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com or call 800-575-6812. That's 800-575-6812. Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMC-FM at HD1 San Francisco. Always live on the free Odyssey app. Live from downtown San Francisco, this is 95.7 The Game.
Yes, it is. Hi again, everybody. Alongside Evan Giddings, back in the saddle, this is Dan Devone, and welcome to Warriors This Week Live, as for the next 3 hours, we'll kick around the Golden State Warriors. Unfortunately, there are no basketball games involving the Warriors with which to speak, but we'll talk about what lies ahead. Yes, this offseason, all the conjecture, all the moving parts. Ev, I'm going to bring you right in. I'm just going to anoint you as the general manager. Gone is Dunleavy. You put on his $5,000 suit. What is your first order of business going forward?
Well, first of all, glad to be back with you, Dan. You and Granny ripped it up last week. I was listening from down south. Did a fantastic job as always. So glad to be back in the saddle.
We're going to talk about what you did down south coming up in the show. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But we got a lot on tap. And the Golden State Warriors do too. I think you asked me the first order of business if I'm Mike Dunleavy Jr., and I think it has to start with Klay Thompson. And it's not necessarily, sign him or don't. And if you feel one way or the other, we'd love to hear from you, 888-957-9570. But I just think that all the decisions they have to make stem from that singular choice. Because if you decide not to re-sign him, then you have financial flexibility. If you do want to re-sign him, what's the number he's going to be at? And that will tell you what other players you're allowed to go out and try and acquire. Or maybe you could even include him in a sign and trade. There's a lot of options, I think, that all stem from the first choice this offseason, which is, do you want Klay Thompson to be a Golden State Warrior in the future?
Oh, that's a good point. Let's just start there with Klay Thompson. And then I want to get into their last game, of course, which was Sacramento, which they got blown out. Sacramento, by the way, they're already out. They lose to New Orleans. New Orleans, if you missed it, will take on the number 1 seed, that being OKC, in the Western Conference playoffs, as both teams get another day off. So let's start with Klay Thompson. I think that the Warriors are genuine when they say, and Mike Dunleavy, when he addressed the media, says that we want to bring Klay Thompson back. They recognize not only what he means to the team from an emotional standpoint in terms of being part of the fabric that created 4 championships, but I also think that he can be a player that still can be impactful and help you win. Now, he's much more limited, I think, in his role. It just comes down to 2 things, Ev. Money and pride. He's making $43 million, or he was. That's over with, okay?
Yeah.
Now the question becomes, to me, if I'm Dunleavy, we love you, Klay Thompson, but this is the offer. And the offer sheet is somewhere between 18 to 20. If you think you can make more, which you probably can, whether that's in Orlando or someplace else, well, then God bless. I can't get in your way. I hope you understand where we're at financially. We want to bring you back, but this is the number. Now, I think that Klay Thompson is going to come back to the Golden State Warriors, but he's going to do it with, for lack of a better term, his tail between his legs. I think he's going to have to swallow a little pride to rejoin the Golden State Warriors. That's where this is at. It's just a matter, because he doesn't need the bag, right? He's already he has enough money to live 5 different lifetimes. So do his great grandkids. He's okay financially. This is just about respect and pride. Now, if somehow he can deal with that, if he can compartmentalize that, then he can come back to the Golden State Warriors. But the ball is clearly in his court. And the reason why I think he's going to come back is because, and I said this last week, it's a quality of life thing. I've been in Orlando. I've spent time in Orlando. I used to do NXT matches for WWE out there. It ain't Florida, bro. All right? It's the middle of the state. And I don't think that he wants to live in Orlando, Florida. And I think at this point, when you get to his age and you've done what it is that he's done on the court, it becomes about waking up in Tiburon and getting on a boat and quality of life as opposed to living in Orlando and maybe getting $7 to $8 million more a year.
Yeah, I also wonder how much pride factors into his role on the team. So, Dan, I think Klay Thompson showed us that his best place is on the bench. I mean, that's where he was his most efficient this season. I realize he came in and started, and I think they had a pretty good record when he was back in the starting lineup. But to me, Dan, if this is to be a quality team and a team that is going to get back to the playoffs, I think Klay Thompson's best utilized as a gunner, as a sixth man, as a shooter off the bench. And so that might come, well, it is going to come with a pay cut, but can you pay a sixth man even $20 million? I mean, that is a lot of money for a bench guy. I think right now the highest paid sixth man in the league is Jordan Clarkson, and he makes 26, but that was a Lakers contract that they moved to Utah. So, I wonder how much Klay Thompson is going to be worth.
I think Monk will outdo that deal this offseason.
Well, I agree, and I think that's a big one to look at. I mean, what does Malik Monk get? Because you can make a case very easily that Malik Monk was far more important to Sacramento this season than Klay Thompson was.
He was their bench.
Yeah, and I think he was the only bench player in the league to average more than 5 assists. I mean, he's a secondary point guard for them, and not to get too deep in the Kings weeds because their season's over as well. But I think Klay Thompson also has to look in the mirror and say, from a pride standpoint, am I all right taking a step back? Because that means not just his role, but also his money. I mean, I think the Warriors do want to pay him, and I think he wants to be a Golden State Warrior. But that middle ground between if you're a sixth man, how much are you worth? And I don't know if Klay Thompson's going to be okay with making less money than, say, Draymond Green, who makes $25 million. He's never made less than Draymond. He's never been in the same tax bracket as Draymond Green. I think that's a big question, too.
Part of the pride element. You talked about the Sacramento Kings. I do want to revisit that game as it relates to one Klay Thompson. Didn't score a field goal, 0 of 10. The numbers, certainly everybody's familiar with at this point.
The only other time, by the way, he'd gone 0 for, he'd never had a point, was his rookie season, and he went 0 for 2.
He seemed to be, there's clearly a lot of pressure. And we had talked about, I think, in a show prior to that, whether he still is Game 6 Klay. Is he still that clutch guy? And in both, departures, last year's playoffs I think was worse than this one. But, I mean, you can put them side by side.
Well, thank God those stats don't count.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really weird for the play-in. I mean,
like Kobe White's 40 burger the other night is just going to go into
nothing.
the abyss.
Yeah, it means nothing. But as we talk about the Sacramento Kings, watching them, and I peeked in and out of that game last night against the New Orleans Pelicans, and they're just, granted, they were on the road. It wasn't the same level of emotion. Keegan Murray didn't do what he did against the Golden State Warriors. But it just didn't look like a very good basketball team. I mean, they looked good, and you got De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis are legit, but that bench was really bad. And I think that they got exploited. That's a New Orleans team that was playing without their best player, one Zion Williamson. We could talk a little bit more about him, but that's a Kings team that blew you out, which I think is sort of a statement as to where the Golden State Warriors are at. Losing to the Sacramento Kings, but not only losing, but the way that they lost to Sacramento, that there is a lot that this team needs to do in order to be relevant once again. And, Ev, let me just say this, and I'd love to hear your response. You know how I feel that this is, they got to blow this thing up. This is not, I've heard a lot this past week about, well, could be a piece here, could be a piece there. This is not like previous off seasons. You're not just a stretch 4 away, all right? This idea of just, well, we need a guy here, or who's going to be JaMychal Green this year? Is it Otto Porter? Is it Bjelica? Hell no. This is much more severe. I know, Dub Nation, you guys want to stay away from phrases and words like transition or rebuild, but that's what you're looking at. If you want to be real this morning, you're looking at 2 to 3 years away from being a team that can really contend for anything, okay? Because this team is old, and how do you get away from this? Well, you need to start with new players, younger players, but the younger players need to develop. And I think, again, that this is something that is going to take some time and some patience. Your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I do wonder how much you can tear down some of the walls of this building or this roster. and without completely losing the foundation. Because I think you're right. There has to be change this summer. I think, and that was my big takeaway from the game, but it was just a culmination of the season. Like, I don't know about you, Dan, but anytime a team loses in the postseason, it's generally clear as to why. If you've been watching the team all year, right? We've been covering them from game 1 to 82, or I guess to 83, and to me it was clear. It's okay. Curry's a little bit older. He's got no help. Klay Thompson was inconsistent. Didn't make a shot. Andrew Wiggins was a no-show. Draymond Green was ineffective and didn't score much. Trace Jackson-Davis looked like a rookie. You can make an argument that their best 3 players were, number 1, on the bench, but were Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Brandon Podziemski. And you're not going to win a game if that's the case unless those players are your starters. We've learned throughout this season that the starting 5 for the Warriors, whatever iteration of it, I think they have like 25 different starting lineups or some ridiculous number like that. Their starting 5 is not good enough. So you're right. They're not a stretch 4 away. They're a long stretch away from getting back to where they want to be, which is in contention for a title. So to me, in one way, I almost think that game should expedite the process of change, because you did see how far you are away, not just from the Kings, but then the Kings who didn't even make the playoffs. Like, they're not a playoff team either. So you got bounced by a team that's also sitting on their couches watching the Western Conference kick off tomorrow, or later today, sorry. So to me, it's almost as if everything's on the table. Like that Shams Charania report from around Christmas time of everyone's on the table except for Steph, I think rings more truly than ever before.
What did you think of Steve Kerr and basically his exit interview, or his post-mortem, when he talked about if he had the opportunity and if he could and if it's feasible, he would bring everybody back and that he would make another run at this, that he still has a strong belief in the core. Now, a lot of that is PR. I get it. As a head coach, you got to be part politician. You got to be part televangelist. You got to say the right thing. If not, that's just going to go viral. It's going to get picked up by Stephen A. Smith and all those shows, and it's just going to be fodder for everybody to talk about. And certainly it's going to trickle down to the players, and they're going to recognize that there's a lack of respect by that of Steve Kerr if he doesn't say that. But do you believe what it is that he had to say? Do you think there was any sincerity that he still thinks that he can rinse something out of this core? And namely, I'm talking about Wiggins and Draymond, Steph, and Klay.
I'm not sure if Wiggins is necessarily involved in that, but he spoke about the big 3, and I want to play this cut for you and get your reaction, because I think this is pretty telling.
We can't expect them to carry us like they have for so long. So we've got to lessen the burden. I think one of the best things that happened this year for Klay and for us was that he responded so well coming off the bench. So, that's definitely an option. That will be determined obviously next training camp. But, I just think that, 82 games is a long haul. And unless you've actually been through it, I think it's hard to really understand how difficult it is emotionally, physically, and especially as you get older. So we definitely need to give these guys more support and more help. And I thought the young guys really emerged this year, and I expect them to be better next year. And, we'll see what we can do with the roster to make some more improvements.
I don't know what you took away from that, but the conundrum to me sounds like, Dan, and I wholeheartedly agree, is that the big 3 need to take a step back. But does that mean that your organization, your team, your win total also takes a step back? I think if anything, we learned the final 2 months of the season, not that the big 3 aren't going to be the driving forces on some nights, but they don't need them as much as they used to. I saw emergences from Kuminga, from Podziemski, from Moody, from Trace Jackson-Davis. There's young players on this team that I think have the ability to get better that could supplement the fall off of the big 3, because I don't think that they should play as many minutes as they did, and I don't think they should be as important to the success of this team as they've been for the better part of 12 years.
When you talk about Steve Kerr, as it relates to the Golden State Warriors, oftentimes I'll get on the air and I'll talk about how old this basketball team, to me, that's just where this begins and ends. It's just age. You can't win with your best players being in their mid-30s. That just doesn't happen in professional sports. And it's not by coincidence when you look at the best teams in the NBA, all those players, their key players are in that sweet spot, meaning in that 25 to 28 to 29 range, namely that of the Denver Nuggets. Not only is this basketball team old, and I don't want to start things by going after Steve Kerr, but I think it's worth putting out there, is Steve Kerr too old? Is Steve Kerr an old coach trying to do it an old way? I mean, when you think about the landscape in OKC with Daigneault and even Malone with Denver and Finch, these guys are all much young. Willie Green, what he's got going on, all of these guys are much younger than that of the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Is it worth entertaining that not only the core of the players are old, but also their head coach might be old?
Fair, but I also think in a way, the Warriors, because they're going to have next season, just for next year, like I'm assuming they're going to have less talent than other teams in the West. That's another thing we learned from this year is that this roster is not that talented. They're small, they're slow, comparatively speaking, they're undersized, they're not athletic. Those are all things they need to address. I'm not sure they can do all of that and get back to a top 4 seed in the immediate. So what do they need to prioritize? To me, it is getting younger. It is getting more athletic. It is allowing the big three to take more of a back seat. But I also think that Steve Kerr's system should ideally be able to help them overcome some of their talent deficiency because, I don't think that this is a team that can just run pick and roll with Steph Curry at age 37 50 times a game. I don't think he can be James Harden for this team for 82 games and remain healthy. So, in a way, I almost think that Steve Kerr's motion offense tweaked or schematically altered a little bit is going to be what helps them make up for their lack of talent, ideally. Because, to me, the Warriors have always been a team that has gotten over the top of other talented groups because of their chemistry, because of their fit, because they know how to play together. So that to me means that Steve Kerr's system is still necessary as long as Curry and Draymond, and even Klay Thompson, even if he's not on the team, I think with Curry and Draymond, his system is still necessary for this squad. And I don't think they would have given him that 2-year extension if they didn't feel that way.
It's interesting that you bring up his system. That's a good place to start. Because if you're going to execute the motion system, which was perfect for this team again, when they were younger.
Yeah.
But when you play that motion system, you are going to be prone to turnovers, and I think he admitted as much. There's got to be there's a freestyle to it, right?
16 of them on Tuesday.
And so when you turn the basketball over, that means that you've got to get out and now start playing some transitional defense, which they were one of the worst in the NBA. They were one of the worst in the NBA in transition, both offensively and defensively. And again, I think that speaks directly in volumes when you're talking about how old this team is. But as you get older, playing a motion offense, again, where it's freestyling and where you're prone to turnovers for a team that's old, in other words, just to put it in a layman's terms, you're slow now in terms of getting back defensively. There seems to be sort of a double-edged sword and sort of a catch-22. While I agree with you that might be more suitable for this team as they get older, but there's also the other end of that rope, which is that now you have to just make sure that if you're going to play emotion, that you got to get back defensively and that you're getting up and down the court. And that seems to be counterintuitive to this roster and their age.
No, for sure. Yeah. And that's why I think you do have to get younger. You have to get more athleticism on the court. I think, for example, TJD's penciled in as the starting 5 next year. I think that there's a runway that needs to be cleared for some of the younger players, specifically Kuminga and Moody. And not just because I think they have an ability to get better, but also just financially. Like, I think that the Warriors are in a position where they have to figure out, number one, what they want to pay those two guys because they're both extension eligible. We made a lot about Kuminga, but Moody's also extension eligible. You're going to have to make some choices about your future. And we talked about it, I don't know if it was a month ago or around the time that, unfortunately, Milojevic passed, but this idea that the Warriors have to lean more into one side of the roster. Like, are they going to stay beholden to the big three and guys that are 36, 34, 34, or are they going to take a look at their younger players and say, we want to invest in them a little more. We want to make sure that finally, after 2 years of, decline, honestly, as a team, because you made the second round, you got bounced. This year, you didn't even make the playoffs. So you're going to have to figure out which direction you want to go in. I know there's a needle that can be threaded in a perfect world, but to me, Dan, what they've done is give the big three every opportunity now for 2 years to try and run it back and reclaim their 2022 magic, and they haven't been able to do it. Because time is running out on their careers, I almost think you can't prioritize them anymore as much as you did, and that naturally means that you're going to have to look at your younger guys and say, these are the ones that are going to determine how far we go next season, because I'm not necessarily sure for 82 games, maybe in a playoff series, but for 82 games, I can't ask Curry to play 75 to 80 games again. I can't ask Klay to play 77 games again. I can't ask Draymond Green to not miss 25. All of these things are really difficult to ask for players at that age. And so I guess I would rather have my season be determined by players I can expect to be on the court and that I would ideally expect to be better.
So when you talk about some of the younger players, and you mentioned Trace Jackson Davis, I just want to go back to that game against Sacramento because it's a bit of a head scratcher as to, I understand why he got pulled. He wasn't very good early on, and I think he made an errant pass that just sort of magnified just how sped up he was in that moment. It was the biggest probably game in his young life. But he also, seemed to calm down a bit. But for a game in which admittedly Steve Kerr said, you saw the matchup, and I'm paraphrasing here, as he referenced Sacramento, he said, you saw the matchup. And once again, we were too small against Sacramento. They simply got out-rebounded on both ends. I don't think they had an offensive rebound at halftime in that contest.
Yeah, they got dogged.
It was pretty bad. And yet, your most effective big is not playing throughout the majority of that game. Now, I know Looney had done well, especially when you think about the playoffs a year ago against Sabonis. So I understand some of the thinking there. But just to recognize sort of what this team had uncovered towards the latter part of the season and the success that they had found with Trace Jackson Davis working with Steph and Chris Paul and Draymond, suddenly to go away from that for 3 quarters and admittedly saying you're getting out-rebound and you need somebody vertically that can help you, yet not to call Trace Jackson Davis's number, not to go after Steve Kerr, but it was a little puzzling.
No, I thought it was interesting that he had Trace Jackson Davis matched up on Barnes. They had Draymond on Sabonis, and I guess that makes sense. But if you're going to have TJD out there, to me, you have to use him like a 5. And if he's not in the paint, he's not going to be able to help you rebound. And I know Barnes is probably the least mobile of the Kings players, for example. So maybe it was a bad matchup. I'm not sure. I mean, the Kings don't play a traditional center, and Sabonis is kind of their makeshift 5. But I was surprised, Dan, that they didn't use Trace Jackson Davis like they've been using him. Not even the minutes total, but just from the start of the game. And so I think he was kind of put in an unfair position. And you could say credit to Sacramento for drawing him out or from a perimeter standpoint, attacking him. But I just think that I don't think that the lights were too bright. But I think that in a one-game NCAA tournament elimination style scenario, Trace Jackson Davis, it just wasn't his night. So I wasn't surprised that Kerr went away from him, but I was surprised in how he deployed him at the beginning of that game.
And I don't think it does a lot for a young man's confidence if you do make a mistake early on not to play him again until, 7 minutes, 8 minutes to go in the contest. That's just my personal thought. Again, just to stay on Steve Kerr for a minute, I think he got out-coached by Mike Brown. I think Mike Brown, I tipped my hat to that guy and specifically in that game because he knows the Warriors intimately, obviously. But his game plan was, the best way to pressure an older team is to get up on them. And he said as much. The Mikes picked him up where he said, don't let these guys quarterback the team. In other words, don't let them cross the timeline. Don't let Steph survey the offense. Don't let him call for a screen and us jump in with a double team. I want you in his face, 3-quarter court. I want you all over every one of these guys the minute they cross the timeline. And that pressure really clearly annoyed the Golden State Warriors. And it wasn't just Steph Curry, but it was everybody. There were a couple of pick six in that first half, including Wiggins, Steph, Clay, they made a point to jump the Warriors and get out and extend. And you could see clearly how the Golden State Warriors were uncomfortable with that right from the outset. And that, to me, is a direct result of coaching. And so Mike Brown took advantage of the Golden State Warriors because they looked clearly unprepared for that.
And I think he just took advantage of their age, quite frankly. I mean, the guy that the Warriors identified as being a secondary ball handler to ideally neutralize that on-ball pressure is someone like Chris Paul. Yeah. And even he looked out of sorts. He looked old. He looked like a guy that is on his way out and is probably not going to be on the team next year, but that's the scenario that they brought him in to handle, and he couldn't. So you need to get younger. I think you need a secondary ball handler. Could Podziemski be that guy? I thought he played well in that game. But you're right, Dan, that the on-ball pressure was something that I think a lot of teams have identified for this Warriors group, and maybe moving forward they'll try and implement it as well, but specifically in a postseason, like Keon Ellis was in Curry's jersey. De'Aaron Fox was in Curry's jersey. They took the ball out of his hands or they took it from him. And that was something that was glaring because 365 days ago, Dan, he dropped 50 in that same building and willed them to a first series win. This year, he couldn't do it for whatever reason. And yes, he didn't have any help, but that's kind of the issue, is that they're in more need of help than ever. And on Tuesday night, they had nowhere to find it. I mean, I would come down Kerr's road for a couple things, but the rotations or minutes or strategy, like he was throwing stuff at a wall and just figuring out if it'd stick or not, because there was nobody in that game 1 through 15 that looked like that they were out there ready to try and take it from Sacramento. And the Kings, to their credit, just came out and whooped their ass.
Just a perfect example. Why wouldn't you extend on someone or get in the face of someone like that, a De'Aaron Fox or a Jamal Murray, or because obviously they'll go by you. The Warriors don't have the capability of doing that any longer. Now, Steph can, but it's a lot of load management. He's not doing that early on in the game because he wants to pace himself. All right, we're going to continue the conversation with the Golden State Warriors. What do they do from here? And my man Ev back in the saddle, as I talked about, I want to go through the entire roster, all those players that get time, and let's just talk about whether we bring them back or not. It's Warriors this week, 888-957-9570. We're just getting started here. Let's hear from you. Get in on the conversation. We'll be back with more right after this.
I'm David.
I'm John. And I'm Chris. We're the three brothers that own Jack's Restaurant and Bar with 5 locations in the Bay Area.
We learned the restaurant bit.
Guys, that's my
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
Evan Giddings and Dan Devone, Warriors this week. It's our last one of the season, so call now. Get in on the conversation. What do they do? How are you going to fix this thing? Where do they go from here? It's going to be action-packed, I can tell, for the next 2.5 hours. We'll be here to take all your calls, 888-957-9570. Before we get back into the Warriors conversation, after break, Ev recognized one of his colleagues now doing MLB Baseball now on the MLB Baseball Network?
Yeah, I guess shout out to Greg Caserta. He's a host at MLB Network. I used to broadcast with him in the Eastern League. I was with the Tigers AA affiliate. He was with the Phillies AA affiliate. He's a little older than I am, but he also had a beard last I saw. So he's clean-shaven now. He's got a 3-piece suit on. He's doing pretty well.
It's television, bro. So when you make that adjustment, man, get rid of the beard and the facial hair. You got to go pretty. You're already in shape, man. But you got to make sure that, it becomes that visual medium, and it's all about what you look like. So, listen, the reason why I wanted to bring in Ev, I had an opportunity to listen to him last week. He was calling baseball games for Rancho Cucamonga. What is that, AA?
So I was filling in for the single A A's, okay. And they were playing in Rancho against the single A Dodgers. So
all I'm going to say to everybody out there that's familiar with Evan, familiar with his work, just appreciate him right now because he is not going to be around for very much longer, all right? This guy is not staying local. I know he's going to stay humble and tell you the right things, but I've been in this industry long enough to know that a guy is on his way. So he's going to be here for the interim, but it's just a matter of time before somebody comes and knocking. And I mean, it's somebody with a big contract, with a big name that's going to say, I want you to be our play-by-play guy. And then you're going to go from there to wherever it is that is going to be your next step or building block, because this is just the start, my man. So appreciate Evan Giddings before we all say, I remember when. Doing Saturday's Warriors this week because the dude is going big time.
Well, so, I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, just leave it at that, brother, because what I'm speaking is truth. This is Bible coming to you right now.
Well, no, but I also want to tell people, behind the scenes, like Dan is a pretty critical person. He's critical of the Warriors. He's critical of play-by-play broadcasters, of anyone in the industry, quite honestly, because you've been there and just you've done it. I mean, well, you could tell from the perfectly coiffed hair, this guy's been on TV for many years, especially when we're talking like 9 a.m. This guy walks in just lighting up the room. But it does mean a lot to me that you texted me after the game, and I appreciate you listening in the first place. So thank you.
No doubt. All right, we're sucking up to each other too much, man. There's too much sugar in the studio right now. People are just they're projectile vomiting. Let's just get things going. Back to the Warriors, and what better way to do it? I just want to hear from Austin in San Jose. Austin, my man, get us going. How do we fix this thing? What are we doing next?
Happy Saturday, guys. Evan, go get that chicken, man. Your boy's trying to tell you, go get that money, man.
Thanks,
And I'm with you, man. I hope you do, man. You got the smooth voice. You're a young guy, but you project well, and I'm not kidding you, man. Yeah, I think you're going to do well, so I just want to say that. Hey, listen, the Warriors, man. I was out of town, but I caught the last quarter of the game. It was embarrassing. I think that now, I think, Dan, you alluded to it, there is no more running it back or making any small kind of moves. I think they need a big move. I've been saying it all year. I thought the team was not good enough. Even if they had made the playoffs, which I think in some ways, guys, it was almost, I hate to say this, but the play-in was actually good, and the way it came down was actually better, because had they gone, people would actually be thinking that the Warriors are better than they are. And I think that if you're critical and you're a fan, look at them and say they're just not good enough anymore for a lot of reasons. So I think that's kind of my takeaway. What I would do, I would not bring back, and I've said this before, I know everybody on the Warrior line wants to kill me for this, but I would not bring back Klay Thompson. Your offer was right where I was, Dan. If I did 18 to 20 max, I would go 3 years. The third year would be an option year, but I definitely wouldn't go any more than 3 years if I bought Klay back. And at this point, I don't think I would. That's just me. Evan, you keep talking about the bench.
Yeah.
And I also differ with you on the bench. While I think these guys that we have are decent players, I don't know that these guys, I would say, are guys we can go into the future saying, these guys are guys that are going to help us win a lot of games. In other words, 4th or 5th position, have a chance to compete for a championship. I don't see it. Trace Jackson-Davis, good player, decent player. Moody, please. Moody, if you're seeing Moody play too much, I think it's not a very good team. So I think Moody's probably an 8th or 9th player. The coach told you why Moody doesn't play. His decision-making needs to get better. He doesn't have a lot of lateral quickness. He can't guard twos. Yeah, he has long arms and he stretches things, but he's not overall, he's not an impactful player, guys. That's just it. And then Jonathan Kuminga, the last thing, guys. I don't think the Warriors believe right now that Jonathan Kuminga is that too. I don't think they're sold on him. I think Dunleavy's going to go out and try to find a number two. He has to. Clay has to be a 3 man. I think Kuminga's a 3 on a good team, guys. I think that's his ceiling. 3 on a good team. But they're going to have to go get a 2, and they're going to have to improve the bench, because I don't believe our bench, Evan, is as good as maybe you think it is. That's all I got, guys. Thanks for the time. And great show. Talk to you guys next year.
Thanks, Austin. Oh, hey, don't worry, man. We're still going to be on Saturdays.
You can call back next Saturday.
Yeah. might not be talking all Warriors, but yeah, this is the last Warriors this week of the season. But no, we'll be here all summer from 9 to noon. So whether there's Warriors news, we can finally get into some baseball. We got NFL draft stuff next week. We got a lot on our plate, so don't go anywhere.
I wish I could disagree with Austin, but I got to tell you,
Makes
man,
a lot of sense.
He really does, and he's been consistent. One thing about Austin is that he's been consistent throughout the entire season. But I'll give you an opportunity to reply on what it is that he said about the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's necessarily wrong about the bench not being as good as. I mean, I hope it didn't portray it as, like a championship second unit. I think the bench looked a lot better this year because of how inconsistent or non-productive the starters were at times. I mean, you just look at that game on Tuesday, Dan. I think that the starting 5 got outscored. It was like 100-40 or something along those lines. Like the starting 5 for sack just absolutely lambasted the Warriors 5. So to me, the reason why I focus on the bench of this season is because, in my opinion, I'm operating under the assumption that there is no big move out there for them to go get the number 2 or number 1 that people want. I just don't see it. I don't think there's a free agent out there. I don't think that there's a trade that the Warriors can swing that doesn't involve Kuminga or, maybe more importantly, moving a hefty amount of first-round picks, which I don't think they want to do. And I personally wouldn't want to do just because of the unforeseen future. So that's number 1. I think that my priority for the future is to get guys or put people in position either on the team or outside, whatever, that have an ability to grow, to develop, to get better. Do I think Kuminga is a perfect player right now? No. Do I think he could be at age 25? Potentially. That's in 3 seasons from now, but they're going to have to pay to find out. Do I think Moses Moody is a guy that if you played 35 minutes in the Sacramento game, they were going to win? No. But Moses Moody's also in his early 20s. He's someone that has the ability to develop and get better, unlike the big 3 who are getting worse. So to me, it's about the Warriors trying to find players that have an ability to improve instead of focusing or prioritizing on players that are clearly in decline.
I think the bench is good. But to Austin's point, and the reason why I agree with Austin is that while it's a good bench, you're still void of a star. Like, I don't think when I look at Podziemski, I look at Moody, and look at all those players on the bench, I'm like, yeah, you guys are good role players. But let's not get this thing crooked. I don't see anybody that's a perennial all-star in there. I don't see that impactful 2 on that bench. Yeah. Well, the bench can be good, but that's assuming that you find that Kevin Durant, whoever the hell it is, that can join Steph Curry, or you find those players that are going to give you those numbers of 25 and 10, and maybe even Steph becomes, not the guy, but maybe he's 1A. Maybe somebody supersedes him in terms of being the centerpiece of this Warrior team. Then the bench makes sense. But if you're looking at that bench and those players to be the guys that are going to carry the torch in terms of stardom, then I think, to Austin's point, you're barking up the wrong tree. We continue with the phone calls.
I agree with that.
Out to Burbank. Let's go to Joe's hanging out. Joe, what's on your mind, buddy?
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for all your Warriors coverage throughout the year up to this point. You guys did a great job. Appreciate it. To me...
Tips appreciated, Joe. Tips appreciated, brother.
All right, you got it. Well, defense to me is king in the NBA. And, nothing was more obvious than the Sacramento game, but when you got to have on-ball perimeter defenders. And let's face it, when you look at the Warriors, how many do they have? Wiggins is definitely one of them. Gary Payton, GP2,
He is, but since he likes to dunk the basketball, and he's 6'2", he comes down on hardwood about 4 feet. He's never going to be healthy. His calves and his ankles are always going to give him problems. So we wasted. It's fun to watch him dunk, but he comes down and it just can't take. His ankles can't take it. His legs can't take it. So I don't think he's going to be. He's going to have nothing but injuries this whole time. So we can't really use him. So it's interesting. What I wanted to ask you guys, what your opinion was, is with Wiggins. He's quiet, so it's not that he doesn't care. And there's tons of teams in the NBA where they have one or two players that have to psych up the rest of the guys. So it's not unusual for some people get on Wiggins because they say, well, his teammates got to get him into the game. Well, a lot of times he's the third, fourth option. Yeah. So it's hard for him to get into rhythm. But the point is, and I got to wrap it up so you can take other calls, it's a shame that you're going to do probably a salary dump on Wiggins, and you've got to include draft picks or a young player. That he's good. Wiggins is only 29. He's got 3 years left at a decent contract, about $25 a year. He could have got 30 at the time. So unless you can pull off trades and get a bunch of perimeter defenders, why would you give up Wiggins and get nothing for him, basically? So that's what I wanted to ask you guys, and especially on GP2, because he's never going to stay healthy. I'll take your answers off the air.
Thanks, Joe. I agree with him about GP2. I think you get to the point where you like what it is that he does, but you have to take into consideration the injuries at this point. But I'm curious to get your thought on what it is that he said about Andrew Wiggins.
Well, first, I don't know if it's a theory, but I think the Warriors are going to negotiate something with Gary Payton II to lower, because I think he's making $9 million if he opts into his player option. I think the Warriors are going to negotiate something where they can get him for 3 years at, I don't know, maybe 15, lower that number a little bit, because I also don't think that beyond next season there's going to be people lining up for Gary Payton II who's played half the games since 2022. So that's first and foremost, and I think that will help the Warriors. But with Wiggins, it's well, like a lot of members of this roster, it's hard because he's right. If you don't have him on the team, you probably lose your best point of attack defender. Draymond's their best defensive player, but on the perimeter, Klay's not the same guy. Curry's never been that guy. It's got to be Wiggins. So the question is, do you think that someone like Jonathan Kuminga or Moses Moody could be that point of attack defender or point of attack defenders next season? Because if you do think that they can be, well, then Wiggins is expendable. Because in my opinion, Dan, he was far too inconsistent throughout this season. He had his worst statistical year, averaged like 13 points a game, shot his lowest from the field, wasn't good from three, was up and down. And I know not everything's about offense, but the whole wait and see if this guy can be the second best player on a championship team type conversation that we ran in circles with and have been running in circles with for the better part of 2 seasons, I frankly just don't want to do anymore. So that, I think, and again, it's about, to me, prioritizing younger, up-and-coming developmental players. I think clearing the runway by moving off of Wiggins, even if it is a salary dump, I think would help the Warriors move into whatever the next version of themselves is.
So if I'm to read between the lines of what it is that you just said, it sounds like a rebuild. Is that accurate? If you're talking about developing players, and if it's not Andrew Wiggins and you can't necessarily find that impactful number 2, but rather just, sort of lean in on the younger players and wait for them to get to a place where they're comfortable and they're helping you win, is going to require a level of patience. So I'm assuming that we're not looking to run it back and or to get back into that conversation of Western Conference titles and NBA championships as soon as next year.
Well, I'm not sure that's realistic. Like, I don't know what people feel like next season is going to hold in store. I'm not looking at the Golden State Warriors like a championship team. Okay. Like, I don't think that expectation is realistic. If they somehow make a big move this summer and, July 1st and beyond, if they show us with their moves this offseason that they're trying to go for it, well, then we can have that conversation. But right now, after what I saw in the play-in game, that wasn't a team that was going to win a first-round series. That's certainly not a team that was going to win a championship, in my opinion. So I'm not looking at them like a title contender. That doesn't mean necessarily, Dan, that I believe that they should rebuild. To me, the word of the summer should be retool. And so I don't think it involves stripping down everyone or making, I don't know if I came off sounding like this, making all the young players the priority. But to me, you have to be less dependent on the players from your championship year. Because I just don't think that either due to consistency or availability or production that they're as reliable as a group as they were even a season ago when Wiggins and Clay and Dre were all playing 35-plus minutes in a second-round playoff series.
I guess the question then becomes, if you're not going to be reliant on your core as much as you have in the past.
I think the question is, who is the core now? Like, who do you want to be a part of this core?
Yeah, well, that's the question going forward. Because if you can't rely on them, then who? Because it can't be the kids because they're not there yet. And that's where I think this begins and ends. I think that the Golden State Warriors go for that big trade. I don't think that they invest in the kids and then just bring this back and then be patient over 2 or 3 years and try and assemble pieces and hope, down the line that they can become a good basketball team once again. I think that what they're going to do over the offseason, and hang on to your hat because I know he's a popular player, I think Jonathan Kuminga's gone. I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to be traded, and I have very little doubt about that. If he's not traded, it will only be because they couldn't find value in return. There's no doubt in my mind that your one true asset, your one bullet in the chamber is Jonathan Kuminga. He, along with Andrew Wiggins. Now it makes sense when you think about, okay, well, what Andrew Wiggins is going to bring me back? Well, with Andrew Wiggins packaged with Jonathan Kuminga, now you're talking about potentially bringing back that player that has been so coveted by not only Dub Nation, but by the executives that make these decisions for the Golden State Warriors. And I'll tell you why. I felt that all along, but I'll tell you what sort of cemented that and put it over the top. If you were just to read between the lines, and now listen, I get it. It was Mike Dunleavy's it was his first postseason press conference. But if you hear what it is that he said about Jonathan Kuminga, as opposed to what it is that he talked about when he was asked about Klay Thompson, when he was asked about Draymond Green, there was a level of certainty. He said, we want to bring back Klay Thompson. All right? It's just a matter of money, but we want him back here. When it came to Draymond Green, he said Draymond Green, and he pointed out statistics to support that we're a better team with him. I can't see, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something to the effect, I can't see a scenario where he's not coming back.
Yeah.
When it came to Jonathan Kuminga, it was much more elusive. And he said, we'll evaluate all our young players. There's some things that he needs to do. Certainly he's an instrumental piece of our future going forward, but there wasn't that sort of conviction that he's coming back to this basketball team. Now, again, don't want to read too much into a press conference, but I think that the Golden State Warriors are going to look to trade Jonathan Kuminga to find that complementary piece to that of Steph Curry. It may not be out there, but that would be the only reason why he would come back in a Warrior uniform next year, in my estimation.
Well, before I completely rebuke that, I do want to play Steve Kerr's comments on Jonathan Kuminga for you.
I think what JK is looking at is how can he make himself more versatile to be available in different lineups? Can he be a three? It's a big question. And I don't know the answer to it, but I know that as we continue to help him and he continues to learn how to create spacing and get a shot off a little quicker and be more comfortable catch and shooting, but also making the right reads, because as a three, you handle the ball more. Can he become a better passer? I think he sees the floor pretty well, but his fundamentals in terms of passing have to improve if he's going to play the three.
And I think that's what it comes down to is he going to be the three next year? And that's another reason why I would try to trade Wiggins, is to make sure that Kuminga's got the opportunity to play small forward. Dan, completely disagree about Kuminga and his trade importance this offseason. The one thing that I don't believe the Golden State Warriors can do is, number one, trade future first-round picks. Number two, trade Jonathan Kuminga, because he's the only player right now on this roster that has a ceiling of potential stardom. Do I think he's going to be a perennial all-star? I don't know. I think it's hard to project that right now. But what he did in the second half of the season was too much for me to give up on. And in fact, I would pay him a pretty penny this offseason to find out. Because if Jonathan Kuminga in one half of a year could essentially go from a player that was out of the rotation to a guy that you could pencil in for double digits every night to be your secondary scorer, yes, on a team that didn't make the playoffs, but at age 21, then I really want to see what he can be at age 25 by the end or in the middle of that secondary deal that I expect is going to get from the Golden State Warriors this summer. The one thing I do not believe that they can do this summer is trade Jonathan Kuminga, because that to me signals that they're leaning even more into an aging core that has shown you the last 2 years that they're not a team or a group that can put you back in a title contention that quickly.
Back out to the phone lines. Let's get to Oakland. I want to hear from Bobby. Bobby, what do you got?
Hey, appreciate it. Good to be on with you guys. They always have a good show for sure. Yeah, you know, I know there's a lot being said by Wiggins in general, and I see it and I understand it. You know, the ups and downs and so forth. But there was a stretch in this season that you can see a version of the 2022 Wiggs, and that's when Steve Kerr kind of put the ball in his hands a little bit more. He became more engaged on defense and offense. You get an engaged Wiggins, that lockdown defense, that low post, he can hit a few shots from the outside. That lifts your team to another level. We just didn't see it consistently enough. And I'm still a believer, even though we've been through it with them, that if you bring them back, you don't let talent like that walk out the door, although they may trade them. I would like personally to see him come back. You know what? And Clay, I hate to say it, I think Austin brought it up. I'm kind of in agreement there. I just don't see, but not just this year coming up, but the following 1 or 2 years after that, what are you going to really get for that? What will he, I don't know, kind of sap the team of being able to make moves from that standpoint? I hate to say it because I love Clay, but you got to look at it realistically. But I would keep Wiggins, let Clay run to another team from a standpoint of getting his money and probably getting a starting role, and then kind of build your team from there. So that's all I wanted to say, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bobby. Again, I think the ball is going to be in his court, no pun intended, when it comes to what it is that Klay Thompson and his next move is going to be. If he can swallow his pride and come back from somewhere between $18 to $20 million, where the door's open, we'd love to have you, but your role is going to be much more mitigated than it has been. If that's something you're willing to do, hey, man, let's do this. Let's do the farewell tour with you and the rest of the guys. It's clearly on Clay. If Clay wants to go for the bag and $30 million and play in Orlando, which I don't think he's going to do, I think quality of life factors in with this young man, then God bless. But we just simply can't go there as a team. That's where it's at with Klay Thompson. As far as Andrew Wiggins, I think I'm with you. I can't do it anymore, Ev.
I don't want to. I mean, I realize his value, and at his best, he's a good two-way player. I just don't want to do that dance. It's like, you know, it's like you're at a salsa class, and you know, for the first 4 of the 8 count, the partner you're dancing with is on the same page, and then she starts stepping on your toes the last 4 counts, and you're just sitting there like, well, what happened in the first half of this dance? Like, you were on beat, you were on time, and then all of a sudden you started giving me 2 left feet. Like, I don't know what to expect at this point, and I just don't want to do that dance anymore, frankly.
Salsa and all Latin dance are in steps of 3. Just remember that, boys and girls. There's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right? It's not 1, 2. There's not 4 steps. It's all in 3s. We continue. I'm going to give you what I think is the remedy for the Golden State, their only option of potentially winning an NBA championship and being that team again next year. There is something out there. I'll explain when Evan and Dan continue on 95.7 The Game.
Okay, picture this. It's Friday afternoon when a thought hits you. I can spend another weekend doing the same old whatever, or
always live on the free Odyssey app. Now back to 95.7 The Game.
7 Giddings, it's Dan Devone. It's a beautiful Saturday. The Golden State Warriors season is over. The Warriors did not make the playoffs. They went in as the 10 seed, and they got bounced hard by that of the Sacramento Kings, who, by the way, also losers last night at the hands of the New Orleans Pelicans, which sets up now the playoffs they're official, as the New Orleans Pelicans will take on the number 1 seeded OKC in the playoffs this year. Meanwhile, it's going to be the Suns and the Timberwolves. Game 1 will be today. The Lakers will take on the Nuggets. That'll be an interesting series. Game 1 today as well. Also going off this afternoon, the Mavericks and the Clippers. The Mavericks seem to be really the dark horse in this one, Ev. Apparently, a lot of people think that's the sexy pick, and understandably, I think they played the best basketball over the last 2 months of the NBA.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know we're going to put a bow on the Warriors season, and we'll continue to talk about them all summer as we keep it rolling here 9 to noon every single Saturday, but I don't know which series is the most intriguing to you, but I do think that Clippers-Mavs series is probably the most even. I do like Dallas, but I think for me, Dan, it's more about the Clippers and their inconsistency, especially like after the All-Star break. They're close to a 500 team. So Dallas has been playing well, but I also just think the Clippers are kind of fizzling, which tends to happen, as we've seen with some older teams.
Well, here we go again, because Kawhi Leonard, is he going to be healthy? How many times we talk about the Warriors bringing it back and doing it with their same core? How many times are you going to roll out this Paul George and Kawhi Leonard? And as it relates to the Warriors, let's just say that they get bounced. I'm talking about the Clippers, and they lose to the Mavericks. If you're Paul George, is there a chance you're like, I can't do this anymore? I don't know whether Kawhi Leonard's going to be healthy. We clearly are not that team. I've given this an opportunity. I'm from California. I played at Fresno State. Is there any chance that he packs his bags or at least entertains coming to the Golden State Warriors? Now, obviously, there's the finances that you have to take into account. But, Paul George is a name potentially that could be bannered about.
I also wonder if, to bring him back to Klay Thompson, maybe he might want to go play with one of these free agents that's available. Just looking from afar, Philadelphia, they got a lot of cap space this summer. They might be able to go out and acquire Paul George. Would Klay Thompson want to play there with Embiid, with Maxey, with potentially PG-13? I don't know. I think Paul George is probably the sexiest free agent on the market this offseason. I think there's a couple players that might be available via trade, but the free agent pool is pretty thin. I think I was looking at it the other day, and there might be 9 or 10 starting caliber players. There's not a lot of dudes or just real bona fide aces in that deck in this free agent pool. So the Warriors kind of have slim pickings, and I do think that, if we're looking at playoff series, to me, the Clippers are one, but you're watching as a Warriors fan, yes, because you like basketball, but in a way, you're kind of hoping that some of these teams do flame out so that their potential superstars might want out of their situation, a la Milwaukee. Cleveland's another team to watch, if they get upset in their first round series. In the West, I'm not sure, maybe Phoenix, but it does appear like after handing Grayson Allen a contract extension that they want to continue to keep Beal, Booker, and Durant together. So I'm not sure if there's very many in the West. I don't know. The Lakers, if you think LeBron's a possibility this offseason, I'm not sure if there's that many guys in the West, but the Eastern Conference, there's a lot of teams, Dan, that I think might be at wit's end with their particular number ones. The Warriors might be able to pluck them.
Well, let's not leave the East out of the conversation as we lay out the playoffs. Of course, it'll be the Boston Celtics, which will be the number 1 seed, and they'll take on the Miami Heat. That'll be round 1. Magic and the Cavaliers will go off this afternoon. That'll be an interesting series. 76ers and the Knicks. That's going to be a lot of fun.
You like the Knicks in that series?
Well, I do, but the 76ers have a healthy Joel Embiid, and he has been very, very good. And let's keep in mind how good the 76ers were before Embiid went down with an injury. I think they were the number 2 seed. So, not very fair to the Knicks or anybody else really in the East that you got Joel Embiid back. But I do think that the Knicks just have too much, man. And I'm a big Thibodeau guy, but that's an interesting series. And then, of course, it'll be the Heat and the Celtics, as I mentioned. You know what's interesting is I talk about the New York Knicks, that maybe
It's also a potential landing spot for Clay.
Well, when you think about the Knicks turnaround, it wasn't necessarily a free agent, but maybe Dunleavy, and this is really, it's easier said than done, but if you're really going to be that effective GM, who is this year's Jalen Brunson? Maybe it's through a trade. Can you find that guy that maybe was in the shadow of Luka Doncic that you recognize that could be a star? Like, it could take something where you're pulling back the weeds and you're going places that other people are overlooking. It's going to take, you really got to put on your GM hat and I think find somebody that could be the next Jalen Brunson. Now, obviously, so is everybody else, and there's not a lot of Jalen Brunsons to go around, but it could be maybe not necessarily a free agent, but maybe a trade of a guy like that really blossoms within the culture that is the Golden State Warriors.
No, I think that's a really good point about Brunson, because a lot of people were looking at that contract New York gave him as an overpay. And now, Dan, he's probably going to be second team All-NBA above Steph. Like, you could very well easily make the case that Jalen Brunson had a better year than Steph Curry did on a 50-win team and a 2-seed in the Eastern Conference. So I think you're right that kind of player, or that, type of guy is one that the Warriors have to try and find. And even someone like Wiggins a couple of years ago was someone that was, he'd fallen out of favor in Minnesota. They were trying to move off of him. He was a flawed player, but you could see it a bit. Are there players out there that the Warriors would identify as being culture or, Golden State Warrior fits, but also that just haven't been able to put it together in their situation? I mean, I don't know, some people have brought up DeJounte Murray in Atlanta after they just got bounced, in the play-in. So I'm not sure. Like, maybe someone like Zion Williamson, honestly, if he's somebody that is hurt during this postseason, New Orleans gets bounced. Maybe they don't want to be attached to that significant contract that they just gave him. It's going to be those kinds of players that I think they have to go after, because I don't see them getting a cemented superstar this offseason. And even if they do, I mean, I guess Donovan Mitchell might be one, but I personally, Dan, don't think that the cost or the juice is worth the squeeze for someone like that if you're going to have to attach, 4 or 5 first-round picks.
We used the word microcosm earlier this year or this show, talking about the Golden State Warriors in that game against Sacramento. I think microcosm is really applicable when you think about Zion Williamson in the last couple of months of the season. So good, and finally became that player that they thought was coming out of Duke. Dominant. He dominated LeBron James at times in that matchup with the Lakers. I mean, he is just so strong and so good, but yet goes down with an injury. That's it. The big tease and the injury, because of his weight, because of his unusual build, is always going to be the 800-pound elephant in the room.
That's not nice.
Back out to the phone lines at 888-957-9570. Steel Toe, where you been, man? San Mateo, the location. Steel, what do you got today?
Thank you, Dan and Evan. Love the show. Yeah, I understand that the Warriors can't be every year in position to always win the championship. So I'm always entertained and loving the Warriors as long as they're always in playoff position, And it's interesting how Steve Kerr was talking about how he wants to possibly develop Kuminga into a 3-point shooter. I thought that's interesting, because when you have Draymond, when you're committed to Draymond, you're kind of forced to be more of a jump shooting team, because he kind of clogs the lane from anybody from scoring in the paint. So I find it hard to really find and make a trade for a jump shooter out there in the league that could be open for a trade, or interesting to see if Kuminga becomes, a 3-point shooter. That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, he brings up an interesting point, and thanks, Steele. If indeed Klay Thompson doesn't come back to the Golden State Warriors, which is a strong possibility, he's now officially a free agent, no contractual ties to the Warriors, and let's just say Andrew Wiggins is gone. Who shoots the basketball for the Warriors now, aside from Steph Curry?
I think that's another big reason why Klay needs to be on the team next year. It's not just guys shooting threes. I mean, look, Draymond shot a pretty good percentage from 3 this year. He's not a threat. Even when Andrew Wiggins is shooting the ball well from 3, he's not someone that you respect much. Pajemski, I think, shot 38% this year from three-point range. That's someone who could potentially improve and started looking for his shot more down the stretch. But is it realistic in his sophomore season to expect him to just all of a sudden vault into, volume 40% three-point range? That's a lot to ask of a second-year player. I think that Klay needs to be on the team just because there's no one else right now that I can see. If there's a free agent or a couple of free agents that the Warriors might be able to use $43 million plus Chris Paul's $30 million to go out and identify and find, then maybe that is how you replace Klay Thompson. But you're right, Dan. Like this used to be a team that would kill you with jump shots, and they're known for revolutionizing the game because of the three-point line. I'd say they're an average at best shooting team right now. That's what I saw from them this year. Though their percentages might point higher, but if you just watch them play, ain't nobody else out there aside from Steph and Klay that's knocking down threes at a high clip.
Yeah, never did I think we get to the point where you would say the Golden State Warriors need shooters, but I think we're pretty close, especially if Klay isn't coming back. I think it's important to keep in mind, as much as we criticize or people criticize Klay, and I'm one of them from time to time, he was the number 4 overall most effective three-point shooter in the NBA this year. So,
in terms of makes?
In terms of makes, in percentages.
Well, he's number 1 last year.
Yeah, so he still has it. And I agree with you. I think he needs to come back because he's that one guy who can still get his shot. Now, listen, is he a starter? No, we've talked about this. His role has to be coming off the bench. And why he's the perfect bench player is because he's become so feast or famine now in the latter stages of his career that when he's got it cooking, you can ride him, right? But if he's off like that against Sacramento, well, then you can just put him back on the bench and then bring somebody else in. You don't necessarily have to start him and say, oh, man, Klay's having a bad day. This is going to be a long night. No, we'll just, sit him a little prematurely. I think he becomes just one of those guys that either he's got it cooking or he's not. And that really goes back to the sixth man, which really, for those of you that can go back this far, how this whole thing started with a guy by the name of Vinnie Johnson, the human microwave. Like that's the kind of guy. You come off the bench, and if you got it going, let's go, buddy. Give us a spark. But if not, we'll go in another direction. I think that's Klay Thompson going forward. Are you ready for my big reveal here?
Well, we've been waiting about an hour and 15. What's up?
So, for me, the Golden State Warriors are in the midst of a rebuild. I know we don't want to say it, but this is a team right now that is so old that they have got, you're looking at a couple of years before, you can look at a team and say, okay, well, now you're ready to get back in the playoff conversation or serious conversations. There's a way to circumvent that, Ev. Okay? Hang on to something here.
Okay.
Man, I don't know. You know what? I may be saying something that's already been done and you guys have talked about this week. I'm pretty sure I have. But just in case you haven't,
okay,
stay with me. In fact, I'll get for dramatization effect, I will pretend I'm Adam Silver, okay? And this is where it's going to start for the Golden State Warriors. There's a level of seriousness here. How the Golden State Warriors can get back to being relevant and in the conversation of an NBA championship as soon as next year and still keep some of the kids. Ready?
Okay.
NBA Draft 2024.
Okay.
I'm now Adam Silver. The Golden State Warriors, with the 55th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, select Bronny James. Boo, hiss. There's going to be this, oh, what, huh? And then there's going to be this slow murmur that people are going to go, oh, wait a minute. With the 55th pick, he's going to the Warriors. So the King packs his bags, gets on I-5. The one guy that he has said that he wants to play with before it's all said and done with is Steph Curry. His good friend and the godfather of that of Bronny is Draymond Green. If you're to believe reports earlier this year, there was a conversation with the Lakers or a phone call that did or did not happen that were inquiring the availability of one LeBron James. Now, look, it doesn't make you any younger. In fact, you officially get older.
Yeah.
But that combined with Jonathan Kuminga doesn't have to go anywhere. He takes that 1-year deal. Now, he's got to take a player-friendly deal. I'm talking about LeBron James. And now LeBron, Steph, and Draymond. And with the emergence of Kuminga and Trace Jackson-Davis and the kids, you have a legitimate shot at an NBA championship.
Well, number one, I think if there's a way for you to get a star, it's LeBron. But if there's a way for you to get a player and not get off Kuminga, I am all for it. Again, I don't think that they should move Kuminga this summer, but I think you're right in the sense that if they are to acquire a number 2 or even a number 1, that Kuminga's probably in that deal. This is my second question, or I guess my first question, Dan. You got me just all twisted in knots. What's up with you and Bronny James? Like you brought him up multiple times through this season, whether it was him at USC or he's in the transfer portal now. Is he taking a roster spot from a kid? Is he how good is he? What is your deal with Bronny James?
And I've really fluctuated because remember I said that it made no sense for this guy, for anybody to draft him, for somebody that averaged 5 points for a bad basketball team, that's USC, and a bad conference this year for basketball, that being the now defunct Pac-12.
Yeah, night.
But when I think about, when I think about the draft, typically, usually after 15, there's nobody. I mean, there's outliers. There's Trace Jackson-Davis, who went at 57 last year, but that ain't going to happen again. Once you get in the back end of the draft, it's a crapshoot. Most of those dudes are not. In 2 years from now, they're driving an Uber. They're working at Target. They're not playing in the NBA. So why not? And I think that my obsession with Bronny, as we get closer to the draft, you mentioned Philadelphia. Watch Philadelphia be a team that takes a roller potentially on Bronny James and trying to lure LeBron James for a year out to Philadelphia. You talked about, we should keep an eye on some of those teams that might have an early departure. If the Lakers get smoked, which they will, but if they get swept by Denver and it's a bad taste in the mouth of LeBron James and his future is uncertain, I think there's going to be a lot of speculation as a result, as it relates to his young son, one Bronny James, and who potentially is going to draft him. Because
no one's going to take him.
Oh, are you got to be kidding me.
No one's going to take him.
Really?
I don't think Bronny's going to play in the NBA, to be honest.
Oh, someone will draft him. Ev, my man, somebody will draft him.
I just don't see
Someone will take him in that second round because they're going to be like, well, why not? What are we going to do with this 55th pick anyways? And if there's the potential where LeBron James is entertaining potential suitors, why? The question then becomes not that you draft Bronny James. Okay, I can swallow that. There's a difference between Bronny James getting drafted, which on its face sounds ridiculous for, again, a guy who scored 5 points. There's a difference between that and playing Bronny James. Now, is LeBron saying that I want my son drafted, but for him to play, like to get into someone's rotation? Just where are we going with Bronny here? I'll draft him. I can see doing that in the back end of the second round. Keep in mind, there's only 60 players that get drafted. So if he's going from 50 to 55, where the Warriors are picking in the second round, why not? I'll take a flyer on the guy if I can somehow lure LeBron James out to San Francisco for a year. But does that mean that I've got to actually literally put him in the rotation? Like he's going to be my 8th or 9th guy to play with LeBron James? So I think we got to differentiate between actually drafting and playing our man, Bronny James. All right, phone lines are backed up because I'm going on a rant here. I want to get your thoughts on what it is that I just said. Oh, what better way to start it after the nation's capital, my man D, who wants to get into the conversation. What up, D?
What's going on with you, my man, Dane the band? And what's going on, Evan?
Evan's, he's busy producing right now, but he says, what up?
Hey, listen, man. What you said is 1,000% correct. That's exactly what's going to happen because I'm telling you, look, Draymond has been working under the table to try to make that happen. And that's precisely one of the reasons why he's still on the roster, to be honest with you, because I don't see any other reason why Draymond is still the Warriors. But in any event, I'm expecting exactly what you said will happen. LeBron will be a Warrior. And then his son will also be on the roster. By the way, man, what did I tell you? From the beginning of the season, I said this roster was not good enough. It was too old, too slow, and too short. Right? Moving forward, if we want to win again during Steph Curry's reign, we have to improve the size, specifically at the wing position, and we have to add a defensive coordinator next to Kerr to help to help him see the light as it relates to defense, man, because Kerr does not know defense. And there's no one else on the roster right now who knows defense. But anyway, I'm going to shut up and listen to you from the other side, brother. Have a good day.
D, before you go, man, my only issue with you is where you been. You can't be taking Saturdays off, man. You're supposed to be in the rotation, brother.
I was away for a while, man. I was in Europe for a few weeks, man. That's why, man.
Oh, look at you.
I'm back.
Rolling out in Europe. All right, man. Good to have you back, D. We look forward to hearing from you next week. But yeah,
all right, bro.
D, you were right. You were spot on in terms of the talent that they didn't have this year. But just getting back to what it is that I threw out there, as ridiculous as it might sound, now the idea of drafting Bronny James, it's not going to be isolated to that of the Golden State Warriors. Rest assured, there are going to be teams that are going to be drafting in front of the Warriors at that number 2 pick after they get all those players in that first round, where they're going to say, let's potentially take a roller on LeBron. But I don't think LeBron is leaving California is the thing you have to take into account. And I know all this.
Hey, no, look, light them up, Dan. I mean, 888-957-9570. If that's the easiest, look, if that is the easiest way to retool this roster, then by all means, go for it. Take Bronny in the second round and see if LeBron, if you can quarter him. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you I watched a ton of USC basketball, but I feel like I watched enough. That kid should be in college, and wherever he transfers to, if it's Ohio State or, I don't know, Beloit, I mean, he's got to go somewhere and get better, because I do not think he's an NBA player. And I also don't think that LeBron James is coming to a team. If he comes to a team that Bronny's on, I think it's because he actually wants to play with his son, not just watch him, I don't know, sit on the bench in Santa Cruz and not actually be in the NBA.
Yeah, well, now we're getting into a whole nother realm. If he's actually going to play on the team, that's a big difference between drafting him. I don't know. I could put him in the rotation, LeBron, but it'll be interesting to see. All right, they're getting backed up. We got a couple of minutes before the break. Let's knock a couple out. Vallejo and Catfish. What's on your mind, Cat?
All right, so look, let's go with this. Try to get LeBron, right? And the reason why I say the Warriors need LeBron for the simple reason, LeBron is almost similar to KD, but he's better. Now, if Bronny come to the Warriors, you know without a shadow of a doubt, LeBron is going to want to come to the Warriors. Straight like that. See what I mean? Trade Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson is not going to take no less than probably $22 to $20 million. And that's my comment, man.
Thanks, Cap. I do agree with him on that.
Appreciate it. Jerry's out in Cupertino. Jerry, what are your thoughts on LeBron James, or what are your thoughts on the Warriors going forward?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I just want to express something. So one thing, I think one easy way to think about this is to compare current Warrior team to the champion team 2 years ago to see what are missing, right? So I think we need a much better all-star Andrew Wiggins. We need a third scorer like Jordan Poole, but he has his own problem. We need a better version of CP2. We need a better Otto Porter. We need some pieces like this. I think the big three, they are together still okay. And compared to 2 years ago, they are a little bit worse, but they are still able to compete for a championship title. And the second opinion I have is that so when you think about any roster change, you have to put the context of what the Warriors may go for the next 2-3 years. I think the main goal is to win another champion title. It's not to develop young players. I mean, I like the current Warriors young players, but apparently none of them is in the top 20 list of the next generation of NBA.
Thanks so much, Jerry. I would say that I think they need more than just a few pieces. They got to get that star. Is that star LeBron James? We see on the phone lines, Tony hanging there, Peter, the rest of the callers, 888-957-9570. Your calls, and we continue on Warriors This Week Live with Evan Giddings. This is Dan Devone. See you in a bit.
LeBron James.
Attention facility professionals, property managers, and building owners. Earn free education credits and network with the top professionals by attending the West Coast Buildings and Facilities.
this, and then I went with it. And just, again, to reiterate, something that a lot of this, yes, maybe I'm trying to poke the bear and get you out of bed and have something to say and join the conversation here at 95.7 The Game.
Hop in.
But I do think that there is a possibility, a scenario that the Golden State Warriors drafting at number 55 of the second round take Bronny James. I can't say that without you giggling. And then it'll be the King who jumps on I-5 and heads to San Francisco to play with the one guy he said he wanted to play with, that being Steph Curry, and, of course, his good friend, that being Draymond Green. As I take a look at the second round last year, just look at some of these names. I'll start at 43. The Blazers went with Rayon Rupert.
Tamani Kamara?
The Spurs went with Sidi Kasako from the G League.
No, he's a player.
Gregory Jackson out of South Carolina. Seth Lundy. Stop me if you've heard any of these guys. Mojave King. I can't even tell you what they did in college or what college they went to. Jordan Miller. Amani Bates. Jalen Wilson from Kansas. Mm-hmm. Jalen Clark out of UCLA. I watch UCLA basketball. I don't even remember who Jalen Clark is. You know what? At 55 last year, a guy by the name of Isaiah Wong, who is now with Miami. That's where the Warriors will be picking at 50. So my point is that whoever it is that you're taking in the back end of a draft, he ain't going to see the floor anyways. It's going to be a guy that's going to be gone in 8 months anyways. So why not take a roller on one Bronny James? I'm curious to get your thoughts off to Walnut Creek. The conversation continues with Peter. Peter, what's on your mind, bro?
Hey, guys. I'm just going to Lake County with my great Trudy's Mountain Dog, and I'm listening to a great show. I think Bronny James is the best piece on the chessboard, but I think it's going to go the other way around. I think he's going to get picked up round 1, round 2 by somebody else, and then LeBron is going to make it so that Lakers acquire him, transfer him, and then somebody else is going to roll out from the Lakers, even Anthony Davis.
There's always that possibility that somebody else is going to draft Bronny James and thinking along the same lines. But here's the difference, is that LeBron and maybe Bronny has got to let everybody subtly know that if you draft my kid, much like that of when, Manning came into the NFL and was drafted by San Diego, and they said, don't do it because he ain't going to play for the Chargers. Sorry, Ev, but Eli was only going to, New York, or there were certain teams that he was going to play for. And when you have that sort of clout, I think that maybe LeBron subtly drops these hints that don't bother drafting my son because I ain't coming to play for you if that's what you're thinking. If you draft my son, you're just going to get my son. You ain't going to get me. So I think that if there is, because there's got to be some collusion here with the conversations already had with the people at Clutch and Bronny and the Golden State Warriors that, let's do this. You're not going to draft Bronny unless there's some assurances that LeBron James is leaving and packing his bags from Brentwood and headed to San Francisco, California.
Yeah.
Tony's out in Oak. Go ahead. What do you before we get to Tony?
No. I was just going to say it is funny. It sounds like the Warriors need to trade up, Dan. They're going to get Bronny. I mean, this guy's going to be highly coveted at this point. He might be a late first rounder at this point. What we're talking about, and people are lining up for this man's services because of the old man. It's just, it's funny too. Also, the reason why, and yes, you went down the list. I mean, I think G.G. Jackson was a pretty good player for Memphis this year. But you're right. There's not many guys in the second round you're going to find.
And I left out Trace Jackson-Davis.
Well, that's the reason why you don't spend a second-round pick on a player that's not going to play for your team, is that in 1 year, Mike Dunleavy's already demonstrated that he can find a diamond in the rough, and to the point where that second-round pick was starting for you in a play-in game. Granted, you lost, but that's a pretty important pick if the Warriors only have one of which in the draft. So one other reason I wouldn't want Bronny, in addition to the fact that I just don't think he's a great basketball player.
Well, he's definitely not a great. Don't get this twisted.
But have you seen the vertical, Dan?
I'm with you. Don't forget where this all started, Evan.
I don't know.
You and I talking about how bad of a basketball player he was a couple of weeks ago. So I haven't moved off of that. I'm just thinking of him as a piece to bring in LeBron James so you could once again try and win an NBA championship. Tony's out in Oakland. Tony, what's on your mind, man?
Hey, good morning. I usually listen to 95.7 the game during the week. So can you tell me your guys' first names? Because I'm not that familiar with the weekend show.
My name is Guru.
Stop.
No,
Tony, that's Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings.
Dan and Evan. Dan, have you lost your mind? Honestly, there is no way that we should take Bronny because he didn't say, I want my kid to get drafted. He said, I want to play with my kid. And that means you can't sit him on the bench. He's going to have to play. So no on that idea. And plus, I don't really even like LeBron James. But beside that, there's got to be other options. There's got to be. And I think what Evan said about the GM, I forgot it.
Oh, Dunleavy, yeah.
Mike, yeah, Dunleavy. He's already proven he can do the job, and he'll find somebody. And the last thing I have to say is, I would be crushed if Clay left. And given the fact that you gave the numbers, like I already knew last year he was the top 3-point shooter, but I didn't realize he was number 4 for this year. So you know what? We need to keep the guy. He can come off the bench. He's already shown he can do that. And Clay's not going anywhere, I don't think, and I hope he doesn't.
Tony,
anyway,
before you go, a couple of questions. First of all, so you're listening. Are you calling during the week? And if you are, why haven't you been part of the weekend show? Because you've been one of our stronger callers this week. And secondly, I want to make a bet with you. Whatever it is, we'll put up some sort of a wager that Bronny James will not only get drafted this year, but there's a strong chance he comes to the Golden State Warriors. But we'll leave the bet that he'll get drafted in the second round. So we'll figure out what the wager is, but you need to call back when Bronny James or the NBA, or maybe I'm wrong. So I want you to call back after the draft.
Please.
Oh, God. Listen. Okay, so first of all, this is my first time to ever call in.
Awesome.
I'm a regular listener to Steiny and Guru and and the guys right after them.
Willard and Dibbs, yeah.
Well, yes, Willard and Dibbs, and I occasionally listen on the weekend, but I've never called in before. But when I heard you saying that we should draft Bronny James, I pulled over to the side of the road. I was going to buy cat food, and I said, dang, let me pull over here and get on this phone. Because I swear I don't think that's a good idea, Bronny. But yeah, okay, let's make a wager. I don't think the Warriors are that I don't want to put an adjective to it, but no, I pray to God they don't do that.
After the draft,
Thanks,
Tony, you will be calling back into the station one way or the other, whether I'm right or you're right. We will hear from you once again. That is Tony letting us know that the idea of drafting Bronny sounds ludicrous, and Evan I can't even mention Bronny without Evan giggling. So somebody out there, please let me know that this isn't as ludicrous as a lot of people are making it out to be.
Well, first of all, thank you, Tony, for calling in. We appreciate your listenership, but also the fact that you pulled over to the side of the road, didn't call while you were driving. That demonstrates a lot of maturity, yes, but also wherewithal and understanding. Unlike Dan at this point, who's talking about Bronny James being on the Golden State Warriors. I understand you want to court his father, Dan, but you can do that in other ways. I mean, let's just be honest. If they're going to try and get LeBron James, I do think it is possible, as they had a conversation, but it's going to take Bron. Like, LeBron James is going to be the guy that chooses where he goes.
Well, I think what could help, sway that decision. I'm slightly being, there's a bit of levity here, but I am telling you in all seriousness that I do believe that his son will get drafted in the second round. And the thinking being, and it could be the before mentioned Philadelphia 76ers, because LeBron James isn't going to a team unless he feels as though he can win an NBA championship, all right? So Bronny is going to get drafted. That I can guarantee you. Whether he's still there at 55 or not is a whole other question. But there's no doubt in my mind that he's getting drafted in that second round. Now, whether LeBron follows his son to the team that drafts him becomes the question. And if indeed LeBron James gets bounced early in the playoffs against Denver and is swept, right? And there is the sentiment that he wants out, then the idea of the Golden State Warriors getting Bronny James at 55 and luring his father to play with Steph and potentially Clay as well as Draymond. And at that point, you could keep, Jonathan Kuminga. This is to me a road where it's a quick fix for the Golden State Warriors because you don't have to trade the assets to go get that impact player. I think that the one thing, just to get ahead of myself, when you think about LeBron James playing with Steph Curry and Draymond, I mean, just think about how cerebral those three are. You talk about the motion offense, and the motion offense is predicated on knowing where guys are and recognizing balance. It's not like there's X's and O's on a chalkboard. It's all about, it's very nuanced.
No, that's true. I don't know if there is a smarter player in the NBA than LeBron, but you brought up something I think is interesting and kind of to bring it to Clay. So you're right. LeBron James is somebody that always wants to win. That's what we've heard from Klay Thompson as well. Steph Curry after the game and even told Logan Murdoch in The Ringer, I just want to win. I do wonder how much of Klay's decision, we've discussed the pride factor, the role, the production, what you foresee for him next year, but also if Klay Thompson, if his biggest priority is winning, is Golden State the right place? I mean, I think he values, obviously, his legend here. He's going to go down in Warriors history, of a statue, he's a Hall of Famer, all the rest. But if his greatest need in the game is to win, well, I could also say, why would LeBron come to Golden State? Because they just got bounced in the play-in. But why wouldn't Klay Thompson want to take his talent somewhere else to, I don't know, enter a location that is in the playoffs and that might be a shooter away from contending for a championship?
I guess the answer to that is just my perception of Klay Thompson is that it's more about what he's created here. It's more about quality of life. I always go back to that phrase because I think it's the one guy where it's really sort of applicable, that he's a guy that, he's only played with one team. The idea of winning, yeah, sure, he'd like to win, but I think he still believes that he can do it with his core. And I know that, he's trying to get leverage right now. Right now, he's saying the right things, and I don't know who his agent is, but it guaranteed his agent's blowing in his ear and just make it sound as though you're going to entertain going somewhere else. Let's take these offers. And once they see, Orlando coming in at $28-30 million a year, let's bump up that offer for the Golden State Warriors. But I think it's Warriors or bust. Once you've made your money in the NBA, which he's certainly done, it just becomes about, your comfort level. And nobody's more comfortable than that of Klay Thompson and waking up in Tiburon, swimming in the bay, getting on his boat. I'm telling you, man, if ever there was a guy that was not cut out to live in Orlando, Florida, Ev, when I was at the WWE, I probably told this story a million times, I would go to Orlando because that's where they had the NXT, and I would call matches. That's how it's sort of like their minor league system. The WWE, their headquarters are in Orlando. Like that's where they do all their training facilities. So that's where you would go out and you would learn the moves, you would learn how to call matches, and that's where, as wrestlers or quote-unquote superstars, they go out there and they hone their craft, not only as wrestlers, but also, whatever their shtick is or whatever their persona is. So I spent a lot of time in Orlando. You know what's in Orlando? I'll tell you what's in Orlando. It's a place called the Villages. You know what the Villages is? It's the oldest, is the biggest retirement community in the world. It's not just a retirement community home or two. This place is a city. You got old shoes all over the place, man. They got stop signs. They got grocery stores. They got golf carts. It is their own retirement city, and they all love Trump, and they got MAGA hats, man. That's why I stay the hell away from that place. That aside, I'm just telling you, Klay Thompson ain't going to Orlando. There's nothing in Orlando. So he's coming back here, and it's just a matter of, my man, I know the $20 million sounds low, but we still want you. Can you somehow rationalized to come back here for the 18 to 20 million. And you know what? I think, Ev, when he does come back, he's going to be put off a little bit. I think that there's going to be a sense of, I don't know if it'll ever be the same between him and Lacob and management, but I think at the end of the day, he's going to come back.
Well, first of all, I do want to second your point about Orlando. That place is trash. It is a swamp, and there are.
I didn't call it trash.
Well, no, I've been there. I just didn't like any part of it, to be honest. Didn't like any of it. I did like the Space Center, but that's about it. I didn't.
Disney World
I hated the airport. That is one of the worst airports in the country. The Orlando airport. My Lord. But all of it together, you're right, is not a place I don't think Klay Thompson would like, even pre-2016. So the question I guess I have for you and our listeners at 888-957-9570 would be, do you think that Klay Thompson's value is above or below the 2 for $48 million offer that he got from Lacob last offseason, coming off a season in which he made the most threes in the NBA? Because I think that 2 years is probably something I'd be comfortable with, but I also don't think that you can offer him anything lower per year than what you gave Draymond Green, and that's $25 million. So 2 for $50 to me is a nice middle ground with Klay Thompson, and I do think that would also be good enough to get him back, because I don't think there's another team that would offer him 30. That's a lot of money for a 34-year-old, six man or gunner, sniper, whatever you want to call him.
Well, there's a lot of teams that could use shooters. And the funny thing is we just laid out, I think the Golden State Warriors might be one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's never been a greater weapon in basketball, at least in this game, than the three-point shot. So Klay Thompson is still valuable from that standpoint. And yeah, like there's a team on right now, the Orlando Magic, that could use some shooters. They couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. Yeah. It did appear some games.
So what I want to do, and we'll start it with this segment, and then we'll pick it up on the other side. But I just do want to go through the roster and just get your thoughts on whether, first of all, you bring him back, and what is their role going forward with the Golden State Warriors. Starting at the very top, Steph Curry. I think we can all agree that Steph Curry is coming back to the Golden State Warriors. But it's interesting because Steph Curry has clearly demonstrated that at age 36, and you touched on this, that he can no longer be relied upon, especially for a guy that played in the majority of the games. He didn't have it's weird to call it the benefit, but usually he has the benefit of an injury where he sits out a couple of weeks or misses a month or two, and that sort of inadvertently works on his behalf because he has fresh legs towards the end of the season. He was healthy throughout the entire season, but you could see it took its toll. So with Steph Curry coming back, I think we can both agree that Steph needs help, and that help clearly being another scorer. And I don't think it's currently on that roster.
I don't either. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I do want to take that exercise into our last hour, taking up until 12, as always, because I think it's fascinating. It's which players are you the most confident in on this roster right now? Which ones do you feel like are safe? I mean, I think all of them are on the table outside of Steph in regards to trade talk. And I think that's just where Lacob is at. Like, in a way, I do think there's a lot of freedom this summer to make choices because we're getting people calling in or texting in or just letting us know in general, one way or the other, people are going to be cool with Klay. If Klay's still on the team, there's going to be some people that are not happy about it, but people still love him. If he's not on the team, I think there's a large portion of this fan base that would understand why and would also be okay with whatever the next version of the Warriors is without Klay Thompson. It would be the end of the big three, but that's where you start. If the Warriors traded Jonathan Kuminga, to your point, this summer, I think there are people that would understand why. And if they don't, if they choose to extend them, I also think that makes sense as well. So in a way, Mike Dunleavy Jr., not that there are no wrong options. I mean, you could potentially set this franchise back, but in a way, he's got free reign to kind of do whatever he wants. Like, this roster is in many ways a blank canvas at this point because it's cratered to the point where you're not even in the postseason. So whatever Lacob and company decide to do with their money this offseason, number one, I think they'll trim. I think they'll take a step back and ideally get below the tax line. But all the rest of the choices are totally on the table. And I'm curious what people believe is the first thing that needs to happen and what the priorities should be in regards to this 15-man roster that was not good enough this year to even get past Sacramento.
And I think it's interesting to note that they are going to, whether or not that, whether you call it retool, rebuild, I think we'll know by their moves over the offseason whether this is an investment in the future or whether they're still trying to vie for an NBA championship. Because I just don't see Joe Lacob as a rebuild kind of guy. And I think that what he's created here in San Francisco is that, or in the Bay Area, it's that they're synonymous with titles, not getting to the playoffs, not getting to a playing game, not getting, that's Sacramento. Sacramento is looking for building blocks, and there's a lot of teams that are like that. The Warriors are pretty much NBA title or bust. And so is that where they're at right now, or is the outlook by that of Dunleavy and company is like, you know what, let's try and revisit the conversation of winning a championship, 2 or 3 years from now?
See, I don't think they should or are operating under the assumption that they're a championship team. I don't think that next season should be a championship or bust type season. In recent years, yeah, absolutely. When you got Kevin Durant and Curry and Clay and Dre, you got 4 Hall of Famers, yes, you got to win the championship. That's the expectation. I don't think that's the expectation anymore, Dan, for me, moving forward. Partially because I don't want to look at this team and just be disappointed if they don't win at all, because I think that's also unrealistic. I think there's a lot of great teams in the West. But also, too, I just feel like if you look at this team for what it is, to me, the goal next year is relevancy or bust. I mean, you got to be relevant. This year, you were relegated again to a 10 seed. And I'll just put this in perspective. They were a 12 seed for more days in the calendar year than they were a top 8 seed. That, to me, is not a relevant team, especially when you're footing a $400 million tax bill. This team cannot be irrelevant next year and stuck between maybe being a top lottery team and being a team that can vie for a title. I think right now they're in purgatory, and that's the one place you can't be in the NBA, is stuck right in the middle without a potential draft pick. I know they have one next year, but the Warriors cannot be in the same spot as this, which is on the outside looking in, but not poor enough to actually recoup anything as a result of their demise.
Well, they got a draft pick.
Oh, it's gone.
And may I just reiterate that it's number 55 in the second round.
That's right. Oh, my goodness, Dan.
And Bronny James, the idea of Bronny James coming to the Golden State Warriors.
The third splash, brother.
To lure. Well, forget about, you're focusing on Bronny too much. It's about Pops, jumping in that, whatever it is that the rig he's driving these days, much like that of the Beverly Hillbillies. Get away from there, Granny. California is the place you want to be. So we packed up the rig and moved to Beverly. That's it. There you go. Get out of Brentwood and head to San Francisco, LeBron James. All right. Phone lines. We have a couple of lines open at 888-957-9570. We continue. I want to go through the roster with you, my new GM of the Golden State Warriors, that being Evan Giddings, and we'll talk about which players they should keep and what their role might be going forward. We'll do that and much more when we continue on 95.7 The Game after this.
I think Draymond's got a cop for Bronny.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
It wasn't the internet, and it wasn't the Warehouse Club.
The Odyssey app.
LeBron James.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
With the 55th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Golden State Warriors select Bronny James from USC. Boo has.
You think he's going to make a decision?
I'm forewarning you guys.
I'm taking my talents out west to Golden State.
You know what?
Where I'll be accompanied by my father.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. As I digress for just a moment, I've never understood. Suddenly become a LeBron James supporter. If you ever listen to this show, I'd go after that dude like he's, public enemy number one. But the one thing that I've always felt he got a bad rap on, and maybe you could explain this to me. When he decided to go to Miami, he was vilified for that press conference. I've never understood why.
Maybe it's just over the top and unnecessary, but the one thing that always gets swept under the rug is the fact that it raised like $3 million for, I think, some sort of nonprofit. Like it was actually beneficial for children in I don't know if it was Cleveland specifically, but he raised a lot of money with that. I think it pissed people off because he made this big deal about himself and his choice and all the rest. And at the time he was 25 and he had won a championship. Got swept by the Spurs. I think people were just mad at him making it all about him. He got the chosen one tattoo. He's a guy that's born in Cleveland, but then he chooses to leave. And there's this hour-long TV special that results in him basically saying, "Yeah, I'm going to be a free agent. I'm going to go to Miami. I'm going to team up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh." So maybe it was just the fact that I don't know. There's not an I in LeBron, but made it all about LBJ.
Well, I guess that's what I don't understand, because you have to back up and remember that when he was a free agent, 2 years prior to that, I don't think that there has been more of an anticipation for a free agent in the history of free agency, and that includes the NFL and Major League Baseball. It was 2 years before he was a free agent. I remember teams courting him. I remember there were teams talking about, well, LeBron James in 2 years is a free agent. Maybe we could save some money or we can open up a space for him. 2 years out, there was talk about LeBron James and the landscape of the NBA depending on where it is that he goes. And then as you got a year out, remember he was touring the NBA? I remember he went to New York. Howard Stern went out to Madison Square Garden. James Gandolfini, who was the biggest star on HBO for The Sopranos at the time, went out there and did a skit to try and bring LeBron James to New York.
I think Chris Rock had a video too.
Everywhere he went, it was ridiculous. It was like the Rolling Stones in their last tour, the Beatles. And so with all of this anticipation, with all of this, this excitement in terms of him revealing where finally, after all of this time, he's going to go, he decides to do it on whatever that, was it ESPN, I believe?
Yeah.
And so, he says, "This is where I'm going." And all of a sudden it's like, oh, the arrogance of this guy. Like, I can't believe it. Like, who does he think he is? Holding out like a nationally televised show to tell us where he's going, despite for the last 2 years, everybody and their brother talking about one thing, and that is LeBron James and potentially where he was going with free agency. I don't know.
I think maybe the disloyalty factor pissed a lot of people off because they felt like he turned his back on his hometown in Cleveland. I didn't necessarily fault him for that. But I also think, too, it's funny. Like, the only thing that I can recall being even close to similar is the Ohtani signing this offseason. Like, the Dodgers were trying to clear, not cap space, but they decided to not re-sign Corey Seager. They decided to not give big money to Trey Turner or Max Scherzer. Like, they were clearly gearing up to spend apparently $700 million on this guy. But that doesn't even compare to, you're right, like the media tour that surrounded LeBron and his decision. And people were basically just praying to God that he would choose them. And I don't remember, I wasn't, I think, old enough to really be following it that closely, Dan, but do you even remember like him saying that I'm for sure going to leave Cleveland? I always felt like he was going to return. And it's funny too, because people talk about this offseason, well, Curry having to make a choice of what he wants to do. and where he wants to spend the remainder of his days. Because I think there are people that are less optimistic about him getting back to the mountaintop, and Curry says he wants to win. I don't see Curry ever coming out and making a choice like LeBron did, and LeBron was 25, and that's been the hallmark of his career, is moving around and winning in 3 spots and all the rest. But there are very few lifers now left in the National Basketball Association. Curry's probably the closest one, and I'm just trying to think of guys. I mean, Kobe, Dirk, Duncan are probably the 3 from my generation that have done it. I just think it'd be really special if Steph was in that group. I just wonder how much he values it. And someone like also Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, how much they value it, right?
Yeah, I think that it's going to happen. And there's nothing wrong with it. They deserved it to go have that farewell tour. But the question then becomes, can you still be a good basketball team with those guys in much, much reduced roles?
The rest of that roster.
So as we just go through, let's go through. You spoke of the roster. Let's do it. So Steph Curry, we'll start with him. Obviously coming back to the Golden State Warriors, still under contract. He's got another year. But let's talk about Steph Curry's role. Can you see a scenario where he becomes 1A or is no longer the focal point? Obviously, I don't know who, if you're able to bring back that star, if you do indeed package Wiggins. And again, just to reiterate, I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to be shopped hard, and there's a good chance he's not on this team next year. But are you still good with Steph Curry at soon to be age 37 next year being your number one?
I think Steph can still be a number one in a playoff series or a playoff run, but to expect him to carry the franchise the way he did even this year, I think is unrealistic, because I think there's going to be more of the post-All-Star break Steph if he has to play 33 to 35 minutes for 77 games. I just don't think he's going to be able to keep that up. 36 going on 37 all of next season. I wouldn't expect him to do that. I thought what they asked him to do this year was unfair to him, and also put the Warriors in a compromising position, because I don't think he was the same. He wasn't in a position where he could carry them in Sacramento the way he did a year ago. So I think Steph he's still a 1, but he might need another 1 if the Warriors are going to be back into title contention. I mean, I also don't think that's unfair to look around the league and say, you can't really do it with just one guy. Like, LeBron's got AD, yes, but you look at all the players that are probably going to be in the top 15, so on all NBA teams. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, 64-win Boston team. The Nuggets, Jokic is a first-team guy, but Jamal Murray is a damn good second option. Is he a 1? He's probably a 1 on, I would say, like 15 teams. You look at Oklahoma City. Chet Holmgren's a rookie, but he projects to be a bona fide star in a couple of years. Like, I just think that in Minnesota, I mean, Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns are good running mates, and they also have quality rotation players around them. Like, Steph does need more help, and to say that it's all on him, to me, is also just not paying attention to the rest of the league. Like, Doncic has Kyrie, Kawhi's got PG, Kevin Durant's got Devin Booker. Like, even teams that aren't in the top 4 have multiple star-studded cast. So, yes, Steph does need a better player beside him. The question is how you're going to get it, or if you believe it's on the roster. Because I think if you're looking at the Warriors, and this is why I wouldn't trade him, the only guy that has the internal ability to me to step into that spotlight is Jonathan Kuminga. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it at age 22 next year, but he's the only one on this team, Dan, that I could look at him and say, you could actually be a viable second running mate for Steph Curry.
Well, then they're potentially making the exact same mistake they did a year ago. Because if you recall, this time last year when they lost to the Los Angeles Lakers, the one feeling that was really pervasive was that they need someone else who can score the basketball. That clearly it's not Klay anymore, and Andrew Wiggins continues to disappear. So who's going to be that number 2? Going into the offseason, that, to me, was clearly what it was that the Warriors had to address. And what did they do? They went and they got Chris Paul, which didn't make a lot of sense, because I think the prevailing thought was that potentially it could be somebody that's already in-house, and that potentially being Jonathan Kuminga. Now, Kuminga was sort of up and down. He started slow, and then obviously, as you've laid out, he turned it into another gear towards the latter part of the season. But I think you're potentially making the same mistake that if you think it can be somebody that's already in-house or somebody already on the roster, I'm not necessarily sure that Jonathan Kuminga is ready to take over that mantle, because we're not talking about a project or a guy that's good every other night or is somebody that can be good sometimes, but you're talking about a true star that every time he's on the floor is going to give you potentially 25 and 30 points and be a number one along with Steph Curry. Is Jonathan Kuminga there yet? I'm not necessarily so sure. Let's continue down the roster. What about Draymond Green? There's 45 minutes left in the show.
That's true.
And we've yet to talk about Day-Day. So what about Draymond Green going forward? What are your thoughts if you're the GM of the Golden State Warriors?
Well, for his own actions or injuries or others, and I think this is also kind of how I'm looking at Steph too, I just can't assume that Draymond's going to play more than 60 games next year. So you're going to have to find a way to make up when he's not there, whether it's because of his own accord or not. And
okay, wait, let me just back you up.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying that's not necessarily due to injuries, but you're already it's woven into the fabric that you're accepting the fact that there's a chance he's going to miss games. It's already baked in
100%
because of suspensions.
Suspensions or injury. I mean, I think I would like to lean more towards injury. I mean, the year they won the championship, I think he only played 55 games because of the lower back injury. I think a big reason he was able to stay healthy the entire season is because he got 25 games off. So I also think, too, he has a short leash with the league. He's walking a fine line every time he takes the court. And so even if it's not on purpose, if he flails and accidentally kicks somebody, he's going to get hit with a suspension. So that's just the reality with Draymond. And I don't think you can move him, number one, because he's got 3 years left. Number two, I'm not sure his value is high enough to bring back something that would be replaceable. And he is still a damn good player when he's on the court. I think the Warriors are stuck with him. And I think you just have to assume that he's probably going to miss 20 games next year. I think that's just how you have to operate with Draymond on your roster at age 34.
As we continue going down the roster, Trayce Jackson-Davis, obviously part of the future of this Golden State Warrior basketball team. If you're Mike Dunleavy, what's his role next year? Is he starting?
Yes. Yeah, he should. I mean, I think Trayce Jackson-Davis makes it easier for you to move off of Looney, which would save you, I don't know, $5 or $6 million. But you could use that elsewhere to go and try and get someone that can play for this team, or maybe you just factor that into a contract extension you want to offer to Moody or to Kuminga. I don't know how you slice it up, but I think Trayce Jackson-Davis and his emergence this year, to your great calling, Dan, they're at the midway point of the year. You wanted more TJD. You got TJD in the starting lineup. I think he makes Kevon Looney expendable because he's also paired with Draymond, their best tandem in the front court defensively speaking. And he's another guy that I think is going to get better next year. I think with a year under his belt, he already made massive strides in just one season to the point where he was starting. Whether he should be a starter or not is a different discussion, but the fact of the matter is he is. I think he is their 5, and I think they're better with him on the court defensively. So the Warriors, to me, I don't know how they get markedly better as an offense unless they, I don't know, maybe use Kuminga to go out and trade for someone. But I do think that defensively, they have a path to victory, and I think TJD is involved in that.
When you talk about the Golden State Warriors and Trayce Jackson-Davis and the need to get bigger, going back to the trade deadline, where it just seems like the Warriors were relegated, okay, well, there's nothing to see here. We're not moving off one of our pieces. They obviously wanted a big. Why is it that Dallas, and I don't think it's coincidental, with Gafford and P.J. Washington, who, by the way, handed the Warriors a big 35 spot the last time the two teams played.
Yeah.
Did the Warriors not have a Grant Williams that they could potentially trade to Charlotte to lure someone like that, a P.J. Washington? Because when you're a smaller team and you could use a big and you have a Gafford and a P.J. Washington that are potentially out there, was that just an oversight on the part of the Warriors?
I mean, they did have a Grant Williams to trade. His name is Andrew Wiggins. I mean, I remember talking to you at the trade deadline. I would have moved Wiggins. I just would have. And I know that they wouldn't have been as good. I think the fact that they started to play better basketball with Wiggs and Kuminga and Draymond in the front court at the time saved Andrew Wiggins from being traded. I think they're going to try and move off of him this summer. The issue, Dan, and why I would have done it at the deadline in 2020's hindsight, but looking back on it, if you moved him for a throwaway contract or maybe, I don't know if Gafford or PJ Washington were available. They could have helped you, certainly. But even if you moved him for an expiring contract, that comes off the books this summer. If you move Wiggins, and I don't think you're going to get much for him, you might have to actually attach a pick to get off of his contract. That money doesn't come off the books until next offseason. So you're basically stuck with a filler player on your roster, whereas if you had got out in front of it, in my opinion, at the trade deadline, then you could have used that money or that player or that spot to go and make yourself better. So I think the Warriors need to trim salaries, certainly, but I also think they need to trim down this roster because they have too many players that we saw Steve Kerr have trouble figuring out combinations for. And I just feel like the fact that 2 through probably 11 on the roster, the production or inconsistency was, I don't know, around the same level. Like, in a way, I do think they can have addition by subtraction, and that's one of the reasons why I'd get off of Wiggins this summer.
All right, up next is Jonathan Kuminga. I've told you, and I'll reiterate, but I'll let you go first. What are you doing with Jonathan Kuminga if you're Mike Dunleavy? And if you are giving him the extension, he made $6 million this year. What are you offering Jonathan Kuminga?
Well, the market's going to be set by, I think, 3 players. Cade Cunningham, who's in his class, was the number 1 overall pick. Scotty Barnes was a top 5 pick for Toronto. And the third guy, I don't think he's going to get maxed out, but he's the one that Kuminga is often compared to because he was picked right next to him, is Franz Wagner. And he's in the playoffs right now. But all 3 of those players are extension eligible. And I think whatever Wagner gets is what Kuminga is going to ask for. You could make the case that Wagner's been a more successful player early in his career. I also think it's because he's had the opportunity to play a lot more. He came into the league far more polished out of Michigan than Kuminga did, having played in the G League. But I think whatever Wagner gets, and I'd venture to guess it's probably around $30 to $35 million because that's the going rate right now. Jordan Poole on line 1. I think that's probably what I would offer Kuminga. And it's a lot of money, but I'm going to pay him to find out what he can be at age 25.
So you are bringing him back?
I would, yeah. It sounds like you would try and trade him.
No, well, listen, again.
Or you think he's going to get traded.
Don't get it wrong. I recognize his value to this team, and I'm a big Jonathan Kuminga fan. He's the one guy that you look at and you're like, okay, that's somebody that I can invest in. That's somebody that I can actually pay and watch or turn on a game and keep an eye on Jonathan Kuminga because he's worth the price of admission going forward, and he's 21 years of age. I think because of that, he becomes your one valued asset. And so I don't think that the Golden State Warriors have the patience to wait for him to get to, as you mentioned, age 25, which is 4 years from now. I think that the Golden State, and I think there's just enough holes in his game, as you played earlier, that cut by Steve Kerr mentioned, that they can rationalize moving Jonathan Kuminga and packaging him with maybe Andrew Wiggins, and Jonathan Kuminga is getting traded to bring back, again, that coveted guy, whoever it is, that can play alongside Steph Curry and alleviate some of that scoring load. Let's move on to Kevon Looney. Is Kevon Looney coming back to the Golden State Warriors?
I don't think so. I don't. And I think Trace Jackson-Davis makes him expendable. Again, you got to figure out, Dan, I think, where guys slot in financially and if they're still like Kevon Looney, God love him. He's a 3-time champ. He is one of my favorite people to interact with just as a media member, just personally speaking. But time's up. He's an old 27 or 28-year-old. He's been around for a long time. He's given the Warriors tons of production, fantastic playoff moments. But I think with a non-guaranteed salary next season, he is in a position to where I don't think they need him anymore. And God love him, but I don't think he's on the team.
Well, you need somebody to be either the backup to Trace Jackson-Davis or somebody else that's over 6'6".
You do, but I also think that there's, and it's funny, so we talked about the Chris Paul edition last year, and I think that was a direct reaction to Kerr saying that we need essentially more grown-ups in the room. Like we need more experience. We need guys that can take care of the ball. Chris Paul checks those boxes even if he didn't play very well against Sacramento. He did. So Dunleavy got him what he wanted, but he also got a contract that was flexible. This summer, Kerr has stated that they need to get bigger and they need to get more athletic. Kevon Looney offers size. I don't think he offers athleticism. I think there are players out there. I don't know if it's a Daniel Gafford, but I do think there's players out there this summer that the Warriors could acquire as a 5 or a backup 4/5 that are better than Kevon Looney at this point in his career.
That's my point, is that if you move off of Kevon Looney, you've got to go get that big. It's not a matter of, well, we could use one. No, you need one.
Or maybe you draft one in the second round unless you're set on Bronny.
No, that's not going to happen. And you know why?
Unless you're set on Bronny.
Moses Moody is up next. Moses Moody, who, by the way, just made over $3 million, close to $4 million, but 3.9 this year. Moses Moody. What's the future with Moses Moody?
It's another reason why I'd trade Wiggins. I think you have to find out what you have in him, right? I mean, I don't know if they decide to actually whether or not they extend Moody this summer is going to be interesting to me, because if he's on the team and he's in his same role, like if he's, I don't know, the 12th man, then I don't think you actually have to extend him, because whatever he's going to be offered in restricted free agency, you'd probably be able to match it if you do indeed want to bring him back after next year. But if you move off of Wiggins and you allow more of a runway for Moody, not necessarily to start, but to play more, then maybe you do want to extend him this summer and lock him up for a cheaper price than what you'd have to pay him on the open market or match next summer. And I just feel like I don't think Moses Moody is the answer to all the Warriors' problems. I don't think there's an answer to their problems on the roster. But I personally want to see him play more. And I just feel like if he's given the opportunity to, that he could grow into someone that's a serviceable rotation guy. And those guys, as we've seen this year on the Warriors with an aging team, those guys can be valuable. I mean, Podziemski was someone that was an afterthought after being drafted and wasn't supposed to be with the team, but played himself into a really nice role for himself and is probably going to be on the first team on the all-rookie squad. So I think Moses Moody, I would try and find a way to clear a runway to get him more time next year.
Yeah, and it's his age. He's young, and he's come up through your system. I think Moses Moody is a significant piece of the Golden State Warriors going forward. I don't see how moving off on him makes you any better. Now, the finances and the money is something that obviously you got to discuss, but a guy that, to your point, maybe you don't give him that extension. You know what's interesting is that if you watch the Warriors, even in that Sacramento game, but it's something I kept an eye on all year long, that if Steph doesn't have the ball in his hands, or if it's not Draymond that's pushing the break, just keep an eye if the Warriors are in transition. It's always Moses Moody, Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga, Trace Jackson Davis, who kind of lumbers for a big. They're always the first guys up the floor. If it was like the Kentucky Derby, that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on who it is. And then sort of trailing into the screen, you'll see Draymond, or maybe you'll see Steph Curry. Because when you're older, you're picking your spots through the course of the game. You can't go full tilt the full 35 minutes, however long it is that you're playing. And that's where youth is everything, man. That is so important to a basketball team, is that you have to have young players in play. And that, of course, is what Moses Moody provides for the Golden State Warriors. All right. We have some more players. We can continue going down the Golden State Warriors roster as the interim GM, Evan Giddings, is going to tell us whether or not the Golden State Warriors should move off on the player, what their future could be. We'll also take a look, go around the NBA playoffs and get some thoughts on who could be the surprise or who potentially could win the whole thing this year. We continue with Warriors This Week. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone right after this.
Hey, what's going on? It's Willard and Dibs for Safeway. Enjoy 3 amazing deals, and as always, earn 4 times.
trade for, what's Giannis's brother's name?
Thanasis.
And Giannis will follow easily. Big brain move. That is funny because Thanasis, probably, for what is he in the rotation? He's probably got more security than any other basketball player who's like number 9 or 10 in the rotation.
I know he's not as bad as some of the lowlights make him out to be, but Dan, he's it is pretty funny. People just put together the compilations of particular players and their worst moments, and Thanasis has got a few of them, man.
So there you go. So if I'm the GM,
we're drafting Bronny.
And I trade for Thanasis. And therefore, I have LeBron, Giannis, and Steph all on the same basketball team.
Exactly.
888-957-9570. We're talking about the Golden State Warriors in the offseason as this year's campaign comes to an underwhelming end at the hands of Sacramento in the play-in game as the Golden State Warriors failed to make the playoffs. Let's get out to Bayview. Let's hear from Jimmy, get his thoughts on what's going on with the Warriors. Jimmy, what's up, man?
Hey, guys. Good show. With the Warriors rebuilding plans, they have, kind of a combo guard. They got a couple wings. They've got, a new power forward. I was thinking, Looney's last season. A lot of contenders would be looking for a backup center. So I was thinking you could package him, and we have all these second round picks from the Gary Payton fiasco. Him and 2 firsts for possibly, a late, early second round pick in the draft to get us a center that can run. And I love Looney, but I don't think he's gonna fall into the plans of the future. What do you guys think?
Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the draft picks that they got, the second rounders they sent. So, I mean, right now I'm just looking at their assets, Dan. They got this year's second round pick. Next year they have their own first, but they don't have a second.
Wait, what number is that second round pick, please?
It would be probably somewhere in the top 10 in the second round.
Okay.
I mean, and I guess technically there still is an outside shot for them to get into the top 4 because they're a lottery team, and then they would get their pick if it was top 4. But in 2025, they're the first round pick, 26 first round pick and second round pick, 27 no second round pick, but a first, 28 they have their full set of picks moving forward. So, I mean, they do have a couple of seconds, I guess, to mess around with. I don't know about you, Dan. I'm not moving off of anything first round related in the near future, unless you're going to get a bona fide stud. And I just don't think that there's a guy out there that, to me, moves the needle enough to get the Warriors back into title contention that is going to be worth mortgaging the future, which is becoming increasingly more valuable now that Steph is going to be heading towards age 40. Clay is going to be in his mid-30s as well as Draymond Green, especially with what we saw Mike Dunleavy Jr. do in just his first draft, taking 2 guys that are now members of your rotation. I think they have demonstrated that they know or can produce guys from the draft, and I'm willing to lean in more on that.
As I take a look at the free agents, you're right. Tobias Harris does nothing for me.
Nope.
James Harden's gonna get another deal, believe it or not, with the Clippers. He's gonna get paid again by the Clippers. That dude's career is amazing. And Harden, hey, to his credit, man, he proved last year that he could play the point and distribute the basketball. And what a lot of people, including myself, felt was a lose-lose situation with him going to L.A. Has proven enough. Even with the Clippers getting bounced early by that of the Mavericks, I think James Harden is going to get that offer to go back to the Clippers. As I digress. But Pascal Siakam is going to Indiana, right? He's somebody that you'd have to entertain, but he's not going to be out there.
No, I don't think. Well, Indiana wouldn't have acquired him, in my opinion, if they didn't think that they could retain him.
Agreed. All right, we'll continue with the list. Gordon Hayward, Kyle Lowry. Come on, man, that's silly. All right, before we do that, Tim is in Raleigh, North Carolina is the location. Tim, are you really in North Carolina?
Oh, yes, sir. I'm here. I call all the time, brother. Evan knows that.
Yes, sir.
My apologies.
Love North Carolina.
But yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, but my thing is, I heard a guy early in the station talking about how Kuminga's ceiling was a 3. Moody can't do this. Like, I wonder where these people were, like when Shea Gilgeous was a rookie with the Clippers or Halliburton was with Sacramento. Like, do people not understand that when people put in the work, they could become something very, very special? And I think we're always thinking about everybody else's talent. But if this kid did what he did in 1 year, basically had to kick his way into the lineup, just think if Kerr never put Kuminga back in the game in Portland, that we wouldn't even be talking about this right now. This guy had to fight and scratch for everything. We don't think that this guy can do something special in the next 2 years, 1 or 2 years. We don't think what that impact of that jump can be the next year. Why are we always trying to put a ceiling on our players? Moses Moody, an 8th, 9th guy? I mean, does he not think that this guy's going to go put work in over the summer? It just is amazing to me, man, to listen to some of the people. I wonder where they were a year ago. They were probably saying Kuminga could never do what he did this past year because he didn't have the talent to do it. So I just feel like, you guys, it's time to lean into the youth. Let these guys become something. And you know what I mean? We gotta believe that when we picked number 7 and we picked number 14, that we picked and projected some guys that are going to be something. Give them a chance, man. We always see guys go to other teams and flourish, and we're so ready to give up on our own and go grab somebody else's talent. Let's let our people develop, man, and go all in with it. It's amazing when I hear these people that just have these future balls and can just tell what everybody's going to be, man.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I don't know if he's a future SGA laying in the weeds or even if he could be Jonathan Kuminga, but he can be a good basketball player. And I think that's his role going forward with the Golden State Warriors. It is a bit peculiar because he continues to divide the room. There are the Moody supporters because he just seems like he's a nice, affable guy. But he continues to be, and you can sense it a little bit in his exit interview, where Moody, as much as he can, was basically telling people in as only Moody could that I need a more defined role. That, this idea of whether it's a lack of respect or playing and then not playing, getting DMP'd for a week, has sort of have to come to an end. And I think in all respect to Moses Moody, it's only fair to him that, there's a little more certainty in terms of his role with the Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, too, that the conundrum the Warriors find themselves faced with is, do either of those two guys in more prominent roles either keep you at the same level of this year or help you get better, right? Because that's what they're trying to do. They were 10 seed. They're trying to get to a higher seed in order to make the playoffs and give themselves a chance, and we'll see. Do those two players give you a better chance at that? That's the question I think they have to ask, the Warriors do this summer, because if you think that's the case, well, then I do think Tim's right in the sense that you have to prioritize them. There has to be more of a defined role for not just Kuminga, but Moses Moody. I mean, Kuminga by the end of the season was back on the bench. Not that that was the wrong place for him at the time, but I think moving forward next year, is Kuminga going to be a day one starter? Is he going to play the 3? Is he going to be at the 4, which he was mostly this year? Is Moses Moody going to be the first forward off the bench, or is that still Gary Payton II? Is Andrew Wiggins around? Does that mean that Moody's in the same place as this year, where some nights he's playing 15, some nights he's out of the rotation, other nights he's going to start if someone's out? What is Moses Moody? To me, he wasn't as much of a priority this season as I believe he needs to be next season, because I also think there just needs to be changes with the aging core. And I know that Wiggins is a player that's in his prime, but again, I just feel like there has to be something that's shaken up with the starting 5 that they began the season with. Remember, Dan, day one, it was Curry, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, Looney. I think 2 of those 5 players, one of them was out of the rotation completely, being Looney by the end of the season. But I think that 2 of those guys are not going to be in the starting 5 next year. I don't think that you could move Wiggins to the bench and keep him at the money that he's at. And I also don't think that I don't know. I don't know if it feels like this to you, Dan, but it does seem like a lot of people want change but don't really want to move any of their staples, like any of the staple players. So I'm just wondering where people are kind of coming down with. We're going to talk about it all summer, but I also wonder where you come down on, just how much change or how much shakeup you think this roster needs.
Oh, shake that baby up. Like, let that thing just get rid of everybody is sort of where I'm at. And when I say that, I think Steph and Draymond are coming back, but everybody else, Clay, you can come back again. I'll tell you if I'm the GM. Clay, you can come back, but you're coming back at a reasonable price, and it's $16 to $18 million, all right? If you can't, if it doesn't make sense to you, if it hurts your pride, well, then we got to go in another direction. When it comes to Andrew Wiggins, I am shopping him. I'm getting creative whether I have to package him with Jonathan Kuminga, but I am moving Andrew Wiggins. And Kevon Looney, thank you for your services. Thank you for everything you've done with this basketball team, both on and off the court. We're going to miss you, more importantly, as a leader, but your time is done as well. The Golden State Warriors, when they take the floor next year in the 24-25 season, are going to look very, very different. I'm the GM. They're going to be drastically different. And that this team is not going to be, well, they're going to still have Draymond and Steph, but their roles are going to be mitigated and limited, and I do not want the overall sentimentality that we continue to be old, that this has got to be a young team that has got a future, and much like that of everybody else in the Western Conference, like Minnesota, OKC, and even the teams behind the Warriors, including San Antonio and Houston, you've got to be thinking about getting better as you age. And with every passing year has to be a level of experience where you're improving as a basketball team. It's not a detriment. Right now, when you think about the NBA and the landscape of the Western Conference, with every passing year, that's a good thing for Minnesota. That's a good thing for OKC. That's a good thing for all these young teams because they're getting more experienced. For the Golden State Warriors, it's the kiss of death because it's one more step closer to your grave. So the Golden State Warriors have to change that complexion. And by doing that, you've got to make some serious moves. And unfortunately, and I hate doing it, but I think Jonathan Kuminga, and I may sound as though I'm contradicting myself, he's got to be a trade piece. And you've got to move him to go get a star in this league that can play alongside Steph Curry and then go from there.
Well, I think the fact of the matter is he's your only trade chip. I mean, I don't know if people necessarily want a Brandon Pajemski or Trace Jackson-Davis. I mean, maybe they would want them in addition to Kuminga, but Kuminga's the centerpiece of any deal. And he was also the centerpiece of hypothetical deals at this year's trade deadline. So you're right in the sense that if they're going to get an upgrade, I think he has to be involved. I just don't think the Warriors want to move off of him. Not because he's a perfect player, but because for the same reason that he's their only trade chip, he's kind of also their only viable path to a bright future. If he fails, they're done. I mean, like if he's not a good player or a quality or even star player, this franchise I don't think is headed in a great direction. But if he is, the last thing that I can do, Dan, is move Kuminga and then watch him flourish somewhere else. Like that is the worst case scenario in my opinion, is that you don't decide to pay him, you move him, you bring in someone that helps you get back into the playoffs, but you don't win a championship. Maybe, I don't know, you don't get past the second round anymore. You don't even get back to the Western Conference Finals, and then you see Kuminga elsewhere turn into something that you wish you had. That, to me, is the worst possible future for Golden State, because if you decide to move him, that, to me, Dan, indicates that you're leaning in more on what has gotten you to this point, which is aging and declining players, to try and give them one last crack to win a championship. And in my opinion, you already gave them two of them. I just don't think they can afford to do that anymore. And another year of potential mediocrity and being stuck in that middle ground, that's just a place that I don't want to see this franchise.
510 on the Comcast business text line. Where you been? Let Jimmy Jacket. Man, the show's almost over. What's going on, man?
Where you been? So, all summer long, by the way.
By the way, when you talk about the Golden State Warriors as it relates to Jonathan Kuminga and potentially trading him, I completely lost my train of thought here. But we're talking about, I think that the Golden State Warriors are going to have to trade Jonathan Kuminga, and that Jonathan Kuminga is going to be out the door for a Golden State Warrior team that's going to look to bring back somebody that can play alongside Steph Curry. Oh, here's what I wanted to lay out.
Yeah.
I mean, you heard what it is at Steve Kerr. You played the piece. Sometimes that's all you really need is just to sort of read what it is that they're saying. And that does not sound like a ringing endorsement of, yes, of course he's coming back. He's our future. As you just illustrated, that this is the guy, our centerpiece, who's 21 years of age. Of course we're going to give him an extension. Yeah, we got to work on some things, but he is going to be around for a long time. Instead, Steve Kerr was saying, I don't know if he can play the 3. He needs to improve, including his shooting and including his passing. And then Dunleavy was along the same lines, that we have to talk. We'd love to give him an extension. We'd love to extend a lot of our younger guys. There was just this high level of uncertainty on the part of the brass, that is Dunleavy as well as Steve Kerr, when it came to his future, that to me just speaks volumes that they've arrived and they may have come to this conclusion well before the end of the season, that Jonathan Kuminga is going to be a guy that is going to be traded to bring back whoever that guy is that can play alongside Steph. And I'm just reading from what it is that Dunleavy and Kerr said this past week.
Well, perhaps I'm getting lost in translation, but you digest that as uncertainty. I hear Kerr talking about Kuminga, and yes, he's got a wide range of skills he needs to improve, but that's because I think they do want him to play the 3. They do want him to be the small forward, and they want him to have a more prominent role, because I think they realize that unless they could use him for trade bait, that he's their most immediate path. Like he's the player that can take the biggest leap the quickest. And again, I just feel like in the last 3 months of the season, what we saw from him is enough for me to risk it. I know he's not a perfect player. He's not a surefire all-star. He might not be an all-NBA player ever, but I just don't see any other piece on this particular roster that has the ability to move the ceiling or move the needle in that positive direction like him. And maybe maybe it's fool's gold, and maybe that's also an indication of where the Warriors are at as a franchise, being lacking talent. If you compare Kuminga to guys in his draft class, he's not as far along. But can he make up some of that ground if he's given the room to play, 33 minutes a night for 80 games? I know he ran into the tendonitis this year. I think that was because he played more minutes than he ever has in his life. Is he going to come back in better shape? I think he has the ability to. And I think that he's someone that can take pressure off of Clay, off of Dre, and off of Steph in regards to his scoring. And if he improves in improves his skills in other areas, I think he can be a damn good player.
I just think, again, that there's just something amiss there when his name's mentioned.
Oh, this is from Rich Mitchman on YouTube. Donating $1.99. Appreciate you. Trade Kuminga. Thank you, Dan, for being smart. So he's with you.
Well, because he's a smart guy.
Well, he's also talking to a guy that wants to draft Bronny James in the second round.
It's not that I'm going to put you right in the same category. Was it Tony that called earlier?
Yeah.
That pulled over you and Tony. What do you want to put on the line here? You want to go 6-pack? I don't.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Well, that's so good to make a bet with somebody that actually drinks alcohol. Not that I'm.
Let's put some big waves on it. How about that?
Okay.
A couple Konas.
So here's the thing. Steve Kerr, if you were to mention, okay, let me just, for example, Podziemski. For Podziemski, it's like, yeah, he's part of our future. He's got a few holes, but you can clearly see the certainty in his voice that Podziemski, as well as Draymond Green, are guys that are coming back to this basketball team. Again, when Jonathan Kuminga's name is mentioned, Steve Kerr is quick to mention that there are some things that he needs to do. There are some improvements that he has to make. And the same thing with Dunleavy. There is not this stamp of confidence that they provide to either Jonathan Kuminga and or the fan base that he is going to be part of their future. And again, maybe we're interpreting things differently, but I just think they're leaving that door open, and they're smart guys because they know that, and this is, to me, this is something that has already been premeditated and has been talked about, that when it comes to Kuminga, how do you want to handle this? Well, as a GM where you're a part politician, let's just be a little bit aloof, because I do not want to tie myself to Jonathan Kuminga and saying he's part of our future. He's coming back to this basketball team. Yes, he has some holes in his game, but we believe in Jonathan Kuminga. And then just a few weeks later or a month later, I got to stand in front of the exact same media corps and explain why I traded him.
This is also from Rich Mitchman. Appreciate you donating $1.99. Keep Kuminga and we're the Wizards with MJ. Not really sure how that applies, but the fact remains, Dan, you're right. I also think it's funny that, like Dunleavy last year, remember, was the guy who said Jordan Poole, we're looking forward to having Jordan Poole here for
did he say, okay, we're going to throw out everything I just said.
So, no, but I just think it's interesting. Like, I kind of listened to his exit interview with that in mind of, well, how much is he really telling us? I mean, is he really giving us the goods? Are any of these guys going to give us the goods on what they're thinking about this offseason? Because also, to be fair, they have a lot of time. They have more time than they've ever had outside of, I think, 2020 or 2021 when they missed the playoffs entirely. But they got a lot of time between now and July 1st to figure out what they want to do. So,
yeah, and I think you made a good point earlier when you talk about how the playoffs shake out, just exactly, whether teams want to make changes, whether teams are willing to move off of guys. Milwaukee's a perfect example. If Milwaukee stubs their toe again, which I think they will, because you and I are both on the same page when it comes to Doc Rivers.
Yes.
And also, is Dame getting exposed
Don't
this
let
year?
them go up 3-1.
Is Dame getting a little exposed this year? Is that worth, even discussing?
I mean, he's also like 33, 34. He's getting older. I think he's coming down to earth a little bit. I think he doesn't fit very well with what they want to do, and I think it was a bad move to get off of Drew Holiday.
Oh, well, and
got paid in Boston.
Let's just talk about, the NBA and talk playoffs for a bit. Is anybody beating Boston? Do you think that Boston is really that much of a juggernaut, or are you like a lot of the other skeptics in Boston primarily that do not believe in Tatum, especially in closing moments of big games?
I think they're an analytics wet dream.
Thank you.
I mean, the fact that they score as much as they do, as often as they do. Like, on paper, Boston's unbeatable. And then you watch them play, and you can see why they come up short in particular games, because their numbers are so skewed. They take a ridiculous amount of threes. I don't think that they play well together. They have supreme talent as individuals, but I think it's very clear when you watch them why they haven't won a championship yet is because I just don't think they fit. I just don't think they fit together. If they are going to get over the hill, it's because I think Drew Holiday is a gamer. I think he's a leader. He's a champion, obviously, but he's a two-way guy that can shut down an opponent's best perimeter defender. I just, like, if they don't get it done this year, I'm not sure what they do, because they made a lot of moves this offseason to try and retool. They kept Drew Holiday. I think they extended Porzingis. They won 65 or 64 games. Like, the regular season, they're the best team, but I think Denver's going to win it again.
Before we get out of here, okay, yeah, I'm sort of with you in the West, but let's just remove Denver for a second out of the conversation. Who could be potentially the surprise out of the West this year?
Out of the West? Ooh, that is an interesting question, Dan.
I like OKC.
You like OKC?
Yeah, I think Shea and Chet, and I like their role players, man.
I like Minnesota. I think they have a nice blend of young and old. I know that their coach is a little unproven, but I think that they are in a position to take that next step, and they played Denver better, in my opinion, than any team did last year in the postseason. They just happened to play him in the first round.
I think Anthony Edwards was little, when it comes to late games, I'm talking about Jason Tatum. I don't know if because it's his team now, not Karl Anthony's team. And when it comes to late game decision-making, fourth quarter, game hanging to the balance, he makes some funky decisions. And that's what happens when you're a young player. All right. For my man, Evan Giddings, this is Dan Devone. That'll do it for Warriors this week. We're back at it next week talking about, the San Francisco Giants are in the crosshairs.
We'll be talking about a lot of things moving forward this summer. But we will be on. We will be here. We will be live and local 9 to noon every single Saturday this summer.
We look forward to it. For Evan, this is Dan. We'll see you next Saturday. So long, everybody.